Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. Today is a very special episode where I get to sit down with two of my close friends, MacBeth and Karl. We've been DMs for years, and today we're going to talk about different aspects of running a game, as well as reminiscing about some of our favorite campaigns that we've had the pleasure of being a part of. We specifically talk a lot about a campaign that we all played in together over a decade ago. So sit back, relax, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more D&D and TTRPG related content. And without any further ado, here's our conversation. All right. So welcome, friends, to a very special episode. We're going to have two people talking today, and today's going to be more of like a dialogue kind of thing. And I think the purpose of our chat today is going to be talking about DM styles, choices that we make when we're running campaigns, and we're probably going to focus on a campaign that we did 10 plus years ago now that you guys, MacBeth and Karl, both DM'd at one point. Karl, if I'm not mistaken, you started it, and then due to a series of unfortunate events, had to step back from DMing for a little while, and then MacBeth took over, and that's when I joined into the campaign. And yeah, it was a wild ride. So I kind of want to start with you, Karl, just talking about the idea for the campaign and how it started. And yeah, just go with that.
Definitely. I think I should make it plainly clear here. I threw the ceremonial first pitch, but Macbeth was largely the mind and the game master behind this campaign, and did amazing things with it. I guess it all started with finding the Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing system, and Macbeth actually was the one who introduced me to Warhammer Tabletop, the war game as well, originally, and I fell in love with that. And this seemed like the perfect way to combine my almost religious zeal for role playing with the three colors of the grimdark: mud, blood, and bone. And I think what really appealed to running in this was everything I'd played in so far had been high fantasy vibes. There's wizards and dragons all over the place, and the world is magical unto itself, and there would seem to be very little cost to power. And then when you play in Warhammer, if anyone's proficient with the old world or even dabbled in it a little bit, you soon realize two things: that everything has a cost,
Yeah.
and that you can do absolutely everything right and still die horribly.
Yeah,
and
I think that's probably the big distinction between all the Warhammer systems and all the D&D systems is D&D, you are the hero, you are the creme de la creme, and magic is no worry whatsoever. And then in Warhammer, you are a dirt peasant. You have to work your way up to be a modest, humble man or woman or whatever you happen to be.
and even better
Modest,
in
humble
the
gnome.
in the second edition rules and everything too, which is what the system we were originally playing on. It rules as written, like you could choose your career and all that to begin with, but rules as written, you were rolling for your career. So if you
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
play that apprentice wizard, well, first of all, depending on whether you're human, elf, or whatnot, you get a tiny little chance to do it. And
Yeah.
second of all, you better hope you roll really damn good. I can't recall if we ended up making people roll for that first one there. I think if we did, we probably gave people multiple rolls and
I think so. I
kind of
think
take the sting away a little bit.
yeah. I don't know because Macbeth, you made my character I think for me because I was brand new to role playing, and I don't know if you rolled for it or not. Do you remember?
I don't remember. I suspect I would have just rolled for it. Maybe I asked you if you had any preference. Like maybe you picked halfling and then we just went random from there.
I seem to recall you asking me a couple questions, but it might have been more focused on my trade because I remember there was the choice between a couple of trades that I had, and I ended up going with I think shipwright and cook, but I could be misremembering that. But I
Sounds
take
right. Cook for
yeah,
sure.
definitely
Yeah.
cook. That was a strong pivotal character trait of Eddie's was being a pastry chef.
If
Yeah.
I
And
remember
you
later on, we may have used shorter lists, so you would choose an archetype
Yeah.
almost, and then that way, if you wanted to play a martial character, you would roll on that as your starter one or whatnot. And I think eventually we might, again, it's been a little while. We might have just gone on to just choosing the career, which I think is a fair of it. With how cruel the system already is to players, I think it's very fair to give people a little bit more choice up front, just so that you don't have to feel so bad when you drop the hammer on them.
And then
I
fourth
think that
edition kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that the way fourth edition does it, I really like because you roll randomly, but you can choose to not take that roll.
Yes.
at the
Oh yeah.
cost of some bonus starting experience points.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Was yeah, that was perfect because
And
it
then you,
tiered it, right? You could roll for some
yeah,
things and not for others, and you just dock XP from yourself, and which was fine because I think it was 120 and then it goes like to 70 or something, so it's not a huge amount. But if you completely random rolled it, then you could buy a whole upgrade or a whole skill, I think, right? Because it's cost 100 XP, I
yeah,
think.
and you
Yeah.
might choose to do that and then do like the Warhammer equivalent of multi-classing and go into something else, which
Mhm.
is which is true to life. Like you can have a smuggler who starts hanging out with a bunch of soldiers and goes, "Oh, well, I'm a mercenary now,"
Yeah.
and not you're not losing all that previous experience as a smuggler, and now you have a better character story.
Yeah. And unlike D&D, you can quote multi-class even though it's like multi-career in Warhammer, and there's no requirement, or is there's not really requirement to switch. I think it just costs more XP if you're going completely off kilter, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then as a good player, you can brainstorm some ideas to throw at your GM to be like, "Hey, I think this is why this makes sense for my character." And where I this is where I think I can go to learn these extra skills. And then as a good GM, you share that brainstorming process and you go, yeah, of course you can do that. If you maybe this is a question to throw to you guys. When should you say no as a GM to crazy player bullshit?
Oh, that's a
I,
that's a hard question.
I think in a very abstract way, I think there's two lines. There's one where it's completely against, this is where it kind of comes into the importance of like a session zero, planning things out beforehand so that everybody's on the same tone. If it
Definitely.
goes very much against the world, the setting, and this might be playing my hand a little bit of the type of GM that I am. Um, I know I'm not a crunch planner. I'm not the one who's sitting there and I'm doing like, oh, hey, well, the party's this big, so let's make the encounter this size and this that is that's a lot of planning up front. It takes a lot of work. I have immense respect for those people, but also the system's never perfect, so you never know if that's actually going to work. And then if one person no shows, all your hard work's thrown off, or the party goes 3 miles to the left and everything that there's ignored. And then I think there's the narrative plot weaver sides, and that's more of you're planning the story and you're tying things in there. And I think that's glorious too. But I think I'm more on the world building side of it, which gives you a lot of freedom to kind of move things around a little bit. So, like, if the party does go, hey, I know that this village is in danger and it's our homeland, but we're going to go off and check out that forest. I may not have anything planned for that forest, but I have an idea of what's in that forest and the types of people that are in there or the types of encounters that you'd run into. So it makes it easy to adapt to players on that. But then the line I draw is that, look, if this is if this is Warhammer, this is a grim, dark, low fantasy, like your peasants. Yeah, no, some of your wacky shenanigans aren't going to come out if it's very like technology based or like, hey, I'm using knowledge from the 20th century. I'm trying to make a fusion reactor. Yeah, sorry, bud. We're still struggling with gunpowder right now. And then I think on the other side of it, no matter what type of DM you are, I think the other side is when it starts ruining other people's fun. If
Yeah.
I'm all fun with rule of cool, if you want to do something totally out of pocket, maybe it kind of bends the rules a little bit, but it's going to make a cool experience for everyone. That's great. But as soon as your crazy antics stops other people at the table from having fun, well, then like we have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. As soon as it's fun for everyone, then it's great. But one of the things I've implemented at my table in the past campaign is I reserve the right as the DM to change my mind on rulings later on, just in case someone decides to do something and I think, yeah, that sounds super cool. But then the players get in their head, okay, I can do that now always. And then there's something I didn't foresee, or maybe they didn't even foresee, where they can use that and then break it in a way that's not necessarily going to be fun for everyone, or just make it
Yeah.
too janky. So I just like to reserve the right as a DM to say, you know what, I could change my mind on this later. And I think that's an okay thing to do, and my players have been pretty receptive to it.
100%. I think that's just rule zero. I'm the GM.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to use my power responsibly to make sure you have a good game, but at the same time, I have that power, and that's yeah. I mean, you got to use it responsibly, but it's also your responsibility to use it, because otherwise things get a little out of hand, and
Yeah.
it can get a little crazy.
Yeah, it's really hard to say no for me personally and just like as a GM because I want players to be able to do their cool things, but sometimes you do have to put a foot down and say, no, I don't think you can use the spell that way. I know it's worded in an ambiguous way, but this is how we're going to decide it.
Yeah.
Like
Making that judgment call.
We had the water walk thing come up a few sessions back, MacBeth, and I think I ruled that you can't dive into water if you have water walk on because it prevents you from going into the surface. And then I talked with Cal actually after that session, and we came up with something that we thought was fair. If your movement speed was greater than the 60 feet that it's going to push you up, then you can move down the difference.
That makes perfect sense. So you just do it like a vector equation.
Exactly. You just subtract off the negative, and then you have the distance left. But I'm never doing math at the table in mid-session. We're not doing trig. We're not doing that. I'm not doing fluid calculations. That actually came up once in my campaign. They wanted to stuff a pipe for a mansion, and I had to figure out, okay, like how fast is this pipe going to fill up with water, and then how much water pressure is it going to take to burst out? Because they used I think it was mold earth or something to stuff the pipe full of gravel.
That's my rule 0. I'm the GM. Rule 1. Just because it works in the real world doesn't mean it works the same way in my world. We've got magic, we've got demons, we've got dragons. Physics isn't going to work the same, and I'm not just saying that because I don't have a science background and math isn't my best friend. But that is, not a small component of it. But in my mind, if you're in a world where people can go into space, and there's more D&D than Warhammer setting there, and not just instantly die. I took some cold damage because it's cold in space. Obviously the rules of physics apply differently. And I think at that point you can just, if you enjoy doing that math, that's awesome. Not my cup of tea.
Just kind of be like, I think it should take around this much time, so I'm going to make it about this hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, also, Karl, to save you on that, even as someone with a math background, I don't want to sit there and do math mid-session. And often it's like the doing math under pressure, where if you need to do it fast so that people can move on and have fun, if you're sitting there for like 15 minutes trying to figure out some equation to figure out what should actually be happening, then that's not fun. So that's an example.
I actually will slightly disagree with you there. I think it's really fun to make the DM squirm.
And I'm on the flip side. I don't want to watch the DM do math.
No, okay, but I see where MacBeth is coming from, because making the DM like really think about their decisions is kind of fun, but just up into a point.
Yes.
Like a 10-minute discussion on what should happen can be a lot of fun and just like stretch the DM that way. But as soon as it starts spilling into like 20-30 minutes on one issue, it's like, okay, can we move on? Can we continue the combat?
And I just always have that little asterisk whenever, again, D&D, not Warhammer based, but whenever one of my players brings an artificer to the table, I just like, look, if you have some crazy ideas, if you can start priming me now, because then I can start thinking about it. Is the more that I can pre-think about it, the more likely I am to give you an answer right in the moment, instead of being like, oh, you know what, that's going to take you a little bit of research, I think, and some time and downtime. Because I've made the mistake of just giving carte blanche to artificers and other classes. Let's not just pick on them, but
we can pick
artificers. Yeah.
They're the techie wizards. They deserve to be picked on.
Similar to that point, I'm running a desert-based campaign right now. And for traveling faster, the party's like, well, I'm specialized in sailing. Let's just strap some sails to a wagon and we'll rip around the deserts. And in the moment, I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. There's so many reasons why that wouldn't work and why that's a bad idea. We haven't played in a little bit, so it's given me time to start to research the background on this.
Oh, gosh.
Actually, like, kind of cool. Like, some contemporary people did, like, a sailing road trip across Mongolia.
Oh, wow.
Before there were railways in the, like, continental United States. There was a company actually trying to get off the ground of running one of these things. And the problem wasn't that it wasn't fast. They like absolutely ripped along. The problem was that it was too fast and it would break.
That makes sense. Yeah. Cause the wind speeds you can't control, and they can get you can get like 100-kilometer winds sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. For the time period, there's like no suspension or rudimentary suspension. So that's a problem. There's no rubber. It's not going to be a good time.
You also don't have the same resistances that you would if you're sailing in the ocean, because you have all the friction from the water. running against the
Yeah.
boat, which I imagine would slow it down. But if you're on a wagon, then it's also lighter, and the only friction you have is the wheels on the ground, which is not that much.
So all this to say, it's given me some time to think of like, okay, they're really stoked about this. I can allow it to a certain extent. Like we can uh, make some rolls of maybe it fails catastrophically. Everyone takes some bludgeoning damage. Maybe we have like certain routes that they can take. Like it's just gonna wallow in like soft sand, but there's like some dried up riverbeds that they can stick to if they just stick mainly with the trades. Like the prevailing winds, try to go back to town the other direction, maybe not going to work out so well. Yeah, we can make it work.
Heck yeah.
My party's favorite way to travel now, since they've hit high enough level, is to just polymorph into the Quetzalcoatlus, which is the big flying dinosaur, because it's size huge and it's enough challenge rating that they can do it at the level they're at. And then
It's like CR 1/4.
I think it's
Wow.
is it? I think it's higher than CR 1/4. It's a huge creature. And I mean that with a capital H. But
Huge.
I I have let the entire party ride it, and I'm starting to regret that decision because I don't think I should let 6 PCs ride a huge creature. I think it should be harder. And then when I started making them roll checks, they're all like, "What are you doing? We've been doing this the whole time." Like, it shouldn't be this easy, guys.
Yeah. So you were lucky before, and you're welcome.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if we're going just on size cat, and I know animal or creatures change in size categories so much, but a horse is a large creature, and you can ride one, maybe two people on it.
Yeah.
Two, if the horse is strong enough and they're not carrying as much jank. Huge is twice the size of large, so you're looking at maybe 4. And again, you can vary it with players and all that, right? And then also if the creature's just that much stronger, maybe he's holding 2 of them in his hands or something, whatever.
I also did it that because if you look at the huge tiling, it goes 1 inch square for medium, and then it goes 2x2 for large, and then it's 3x3 for huge. And I'm like, well, I can fit 9 medium creatures in a in a 3x3 grid. So
I mean, if it fits,
if it fits, it fits.
Update: it is challenge rating 2.
Okay, yeah,
Ooh.
I thought it was higher than a quarter. I just didn't know how high.
It's still really low for a huge size creature. Like that's that's
that can fly. Yeah, that's
that can fly. Yeah, exactly. But
Your
polymorph only lasts for an hour, so
there's the limiter.
yeah. Well,
like,
but its speed I think is 80 feet, and then the way that scales up in D&D is you take the 10 place and put mile after it, right? So it goes 8 miles in an hour, which is pretty far.
You're hoofing.
Yeah.
16 on 2 spell slots.
16 on 2 spell slots. Yeah,
Look,
to pause for a little bit.
Just start making them go further distances and make your caster use up all their spell slots and then get a trounce when they end up at the location. They'll start using it a lot more sparingly.
See, the problem is they're on small islands right now, so they're able just to traverse the entire island. And I'm having these ideas for encounters they're gonna see, and they're like, "No, we're just gonna fly over it." And I'm like, "All right, just throw away a bat."
Flying encounter.
I have done a flying encounter. It's a little bit tricky though. I feel bad because the person who's polymorphed can't really do much. So I don't like throwing a combat where one person just kind of has to sit there and not have a fun time, because well, the player that does that, she has really good action economy with her druid. I think she was doing like 3 hits a turn if she sets it up right, because she'll set up like an area of effect spell, use her main action, and then use a bonus action for the archer in the starry form or something. And
you could try giving her. You could try giving her opportunities to do skill checks or something to maybe like protect the party members and all that. So yeah, you're not really using the action economy quite as much, but you'd be able to. They still get to be an active player then. They can be like, okay, so like do, I don't know, an athletics check to try to get some distance from the other flied things, or acrobatics to position yourself in between, the attacks and your party members or stuff. Or
and lay out the options at the start of combat maybe, so that she has decision points at every one of her turns of, do I need to protect the party? Do we want to be on the offensive? What else? She personally can attack, or
if you really want to limit their use of it too, you could introduce like a bigger flying predator. So it's risky when they take to the skies, because most of the things this bigger predator eats is a lot smaller, and then it sees you, a huge sized creature, you're lunch, you're not a snack. And this can be kind of a reoccurring danger where, like, if you make it, I don't know, it doesn't have to be like an ancient red dragon or something, but if you make it something big and scary, they now have something like okay, well, we could transform and we can fly away, but do we want to risk it? What if we attract the big beastie? And it gives another dynamic to some of the encounters that you're doing too, which could be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Ooh, or maybe the enemies have divination. So if you fly, it makes it so much easier for them to spot you and know where you're going.
I like that. I like that a lot.
I'm in
Or
this
they all-
campaign. I'm shooting my own foot off.
Or they have dispel and they're casting it at 9th level.
Ooh.
I do have to say, Macbeth, in that last session when you cast a spell, it was close.
Okay.
Because I rolled it
nice.
behind the screen. I think you rolled a 7, and then I added the 8, so it was 15. But you'll find this out fairly shortly, I think, next session, so it's not much of a spoiler. But they used a wish spell to cast that thing. So that was the manifestation of a wish. Their wish was to have a ship that was made up of minotaurs sailing across the deserts.
What?
And
You can
isn't
use
that
the
what
wish
we
spell
all
for
want?
anything, so...
Isn't that exactly what we all want out of life?
I mean, that's what I want, and I'm just vicariously living through my NPCs.
Only if you can be one of the minotaurs.
No, they're in the basement of the ship reading a book.
What a waste of a wish spell.
Wishes are wasted on the weak.
Yeah, and now they have like a 1/4 chance of never being able to cast it again. Or whatever it is. Because like every time you cast Wish outside of the strict purview of casting an 8th level spell or lower, you have to risk not being able to ever cast it again.
Is it not being able to cast it or not knowing the spell anymore?
I think it's the latter. I need to check the wording, but I remember when I was reading through what you could do with Wish, it was something along the lines of you either forget it or something like that. But I mean,
if it's just forgetting it, if you're a wizard, that becomes like very inconsequential because you make a scroll of it once.
Yeah.
You keep that it's safe and you keep on casting wish for whatever you want. Oh, I forgot it. One sec. Let me copy it back into my spellbook. And
I feel like it's not being able to cast it again because otherwise, what's the point?
That's a more. I mean, otherwise, like it only really punishes people who aren't wizards or wizards who didn't plan ahead. Which I mean, at that point, you're like, I'm bending reality to my will. So common sense might not be so common.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it might make you very forgetful. Who needs to remember anything when you can wish it into existence?
Yeah, I could just wish for it.
I can just wish to remember what happened yesterday. Okay, we got a little sidetracked.
That was a solid tangent.
It was good.
Doesn't sound like us at all.
No,
which does remind me of this campaign that we're talking about.
Yes, the one we're talking about.
All of our first long running campaign.
Yeah,
was the most easily sidetracked campaign table I have ever sat at, and that set my normalcy bar for a campaign.
Yeah.
So every time now that I'm playing a session and we're like really on task, I'm like, I didn't expect we'd get this far. I'm gonna make some stuff up on the fly.
Oh yeah.
I think the players may not have had it, but I think all the characters had some pretty severe ADHD. Yeah. I don't know what the ADHD is, but the doctor says I've got 80 of them. So yay.
Oh my gosh. No, that campaign was a lot of fun. I remember very distinctly the moment, Macbeth, where we were on one island and there was a rock that was made of solid gold and Eddie was just chipping away at it and everyone had fled back to the ship, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna get this gold. And
yeah, you were under cannon fire.
Yeah.
And
Eddie was like, I'm not gonna get hit. I'm small.
And true to Warhammer style, there were ships firing cannons at you from far away, hard to hit a little halfling. But it's a cannonball. That would have been the end of you.
Yeah. Well, and then I was new. I didn't know the lethality of a cannonball, but in D&D, the lethality of a cannonball is not unless you're a peasant, basically, right? Like cannonball is gonna hurt, but it's not gonna kill you. But in Warhammer, it's like that cannonball is death. Death just waiting to happen.
Understanding Macbeth's themes as a narrative weaver, I tend to put a healthy fear into anything seafaring and ship-based. I don't think it's paranoia if it's turned out to be true more times than it's not. Actually, one question I would be really interested in is So obviously I wasn't there when you took over the reins and took over the campaign and everything. So I don't really know much what happened in the interim before I would manage to rejoin and everything. I've never taken over a campaign after someone started it before. How, like, what was that like? How was that, uh, I guess taking stepping up to it and making sure that everybody gets to keep on playing their story, because like people put a lot of time into learning this new setting or this new system, and they make all these characters, and we're doing percentile system instead of d20 system, and it's not like, especially second edition was not written clearly. It was written like almost like a textbook, like a written one at that. That's not shade towards the system. I still love it. If you're listening, any potential sponsors of Warhammer. But no, I've always kind of thought it was interesting. I'd be interested in what it was kind of like to be able to step in there with characters that had already been played in a campaign that you had played in. And we're now stepping up to start directing it.
I wish I could remember those first couple sessions better, because I think now my view of that is so colored by the eventual success. Like, got it reasonably dialed and reasonably figured out. Part of it was made easier because you had done a lot of the legwork in setting the tone of the system. And I have a question to come back at you a little bit after this. So one of the challenges was coming up with good things for us to do, because I hadn't run a campaign before and you didn't have like a long-term set kind of thing. And I think where we picked up, the last session you had run, we'd been missing somebody. So you did just like a little side quest thing. And I think I took that and ran with it a little bit further. Like, you just kind of had us go out in the woods. You had a vague idea that there were some werewolves there. We fought some werewolves. We went with these badass looking mercenaries. They got messed up, so we ran back to town. Which in of itself, I'm going to stop here and expound. A good tip for potential DMs is that's a good use of NPCs. Introduce them, use them as a wharf effect. Introduce them as badass. They're really cool. They go out, they get wrecked first. Now you have the players going, oh crap, this is really dangerous, but you haven't killed a character.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea, because if you don't do that, players and DMs might wrongfully presume that goblins, much like in D&D, are nothing to be scoffed at. And it turns out they're far more lethal than
super lethal. Yeah.
I do like that idea, MacBeth, because I call it red shirting. So finding your NPC red shirts.
Yeah, depending on the way, right? Because NPCs are usually red shirts. If a red shirt dies, you don't have to worry about it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they were just a peasant. We went out with this like big, buff, battle-scarred dwarf slayer. He like veteran of 100 battles.
Yeah.
Nope, dead.
Well, 100 was the limit.
We need to run. So I had that tone that you had set and just tried to continue carrying that forward and slowly coming up with a few more things to put together. One of the really fun parts of it was getting to be the DM of a character I cared about, because I had played Magdalene and started to develop that character, had a direction I wanted her to go, and I was able to get her in that direction and have her finish as being a badass. Like, I got to have her whole story just in more of a background support role, which was really fun.
I mean, to this day, I still use her as one of my primary NPCs in anything I run now. I mean, some of the others as well, but just given where she ended up narratively, it's really easy to kind of fit her in wherever the party is. And a lot of the times they're not dealing directly with her, because she's a big shot now, but they're dealing with someone from her fleet and one of her, I don't know, lieutenants or whatnot. I don't know, you can name whatever officer you want to call him on it, but someone in her hierarchy of command. And at least in my interpretation of the old world, she is the terror of the seas, not those vampire captains, but
yeah, no worries about them anymore.
Yeah.
And that was another another legacy of your start to the campaign, because I think this was during your tenure. We got in a fight with a guy who was a bounty hunter who was after the person we were protecting. We killed him and then took his boat. And that
Yeah.
became the boat through many, many upgrades. And you would not recognize it at the end as the beginning. That's the boat you're holding up on screen.
It's literally
Very
the ship
poorly
of
spelled.
Theseus.
Oh,
So creatively, just to sum up
Yeah.
the answer to your question, creatively, it was taking the little seeds that you had planted and running with them as best I could.
Well, and it's also interesting too, because like you said, this was your first time as a GM or DM, whatever you want to call it. And I wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, it was my first time playing, but it was a well-run campaign by the time I got to it. I thought
Thank
there was a
you.
good narrative arc. I don't know how much prep you did for those sessions and how much we followed it, because it kind of did not like feeling like it was railroaded, but it did feel like it was very story driven and we were on some kind of track. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely off base, but Karl, do you agree or disagree with that
no,
statement? It was pretty on
I would
track.
say in any campaign that I've had the fortune of playing in that Macbeth's been running, um, one thing I love that he's a plot weaver. He's a
Mhm.
storyteller,
Yeah,
and he does that better than almost any GM that I think I've ever played with. There, it's
agreed.
not only does he have an overarching story, but all the side stories tie into the main weave.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then all the character stories end up getting tied into the weave as
Yeah.
well. And you get this beautiful tapestry of narrative where like I said before, I'm a setting guy. I'm a world builder.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like I love the story. That's great. That's not my forte. I can adapt to being like, hey, yeah, sure. If you guys want to go off and run through Sterling, sure, go there. Let's find out what's happening in Workbad. Cool. Oh, it's run by a council of merchants. Great. Yeah, just knowing kind of what's going to run into where type thing, and like I don't know what's happening in Ostland right now, but I know enough about Ostland and my interpretation of the world that what's going to happen there. The
Exactly.
shortcoming on me there is that I don't it takes a lot more conscious effort to then tie everything in, and it can seem a little chaotic from my approach. Meanwhile, when you're a plot weaver like that, it's I mean, honestly, I always forget that was your first campaign because like it just it went smoother than I think most pre-planned campaigns that
Oh
I've
yeah.
played in go. Like if you take the book off the shelf or whatever, I don't think those go as smoothly as the way that you tie in all the little hints from earlier too of, oh, you ran into that person and you treated them this way, and now 17 sessions later, guess who's back? And it I know I think you do an amazing job of it. I don't know if you see it that way for it, but like if we have the triple Venn diagram of the crunch planner, the world building setter, and the plot weaver, I think you're primarily in the plot weaver with a little bit out, and I think you do it damn well.
I mean, also in praising Macbeth here on this line, I think you also do a great job of world building, because in the last
Yeah.
campaign that I played in you ran, I felt so immersed in that story, and I know you are writing it into a book, and I can't wait to read the whole thing as someone who played in it. But it really did feel like a very well crafted and thought out world, as well as having this very intricate plot. Like we cared for so many of the NPCs, and they were such pivotal characters, and it's not something you often find in a RPG campaign run by anyone. Not saying that most people can't run it. A lot of people run great campaigns, but the story in that camp, it was, I don't know, I just lost some
And it's
words.
normally easy not to care about the NPCs, right? Even the ones that the DM really wants you to care about.
Yes.
It's normally not those. It's like Bob and the Goblin that you saved from the camp that the DM meant for you to kill that you fall in love with.
Yeah.
No, the amount of just impactful and long lasting and just genuine connections to NPCs, I think it goes a long way.
And just to
So
circle back to the
I need
question that was
to
asked.
hop out of the call now because I'm dying of embarrassment and need to go to the hospital.
Oh,
I do want to circle back to the question though, which was just how much planning did you put into those sessions? Were you thinking about it, or was there a lot of improv in those sessions? If you recall, I know it was 10 plus years ago.
Yes.
Moving on.
One of the things that helped that first campaign so much was a little bit of a luck of the draw. So I think there was the werewolf thing and trying to follow that thread and thinking, well, we haven't done like a classic dungeon crawl in this campaign yet, so let's do something like that. Oh, let's have the damsel in distress in the dungeon, and then flip that and just turn it on its head. So she is actually really dangerous.
Mm.
And that's how we got Lady Aelith. And so we had this thread connecting all the points of the campaign, because you had to get Lady Aelith back to her seat of power in Bretonia. So it was railroaded or rivered, I guess. You're traveling on the boat down this mighty river, had to get to the ocean, had to get to this certain spot on the coast along Bretonia. And it was just a long quest. And so everything that happened off of that had the boat to tie back to, had that main quest line to tie back to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I would do my best to tie side quests into the people. So I was trying to guess what characters we're going to do and what you're going to be interested in, and running off of that. And then for both campaigns, just an important part is remembering your NPCs.
Yeah.
So that even if you didn't have a plan for them, you can have a plan for them now, and then the story becomes a little bit more player driven. So to jump into are you raising your hand?
I just didn't want to interrupt your train of thought. I was but I guess I did by raising my hand. I was wondering, do you keep like a log of them or anything? Like if you have to make up an NPC on the moment, do you scratch down any information, or do you just go back to that big brain and pull that out of the aether again?
Gotta jot it down.
Yep.
That's not something I did for the first campaign, but for every campaign since then, I try to write down at some point in the week after the campaign, write down everything that I can remember happening, so I can come back around to it. And then for both campaigns, the way I would start my planning would be just listing out key NPCs, and they might not actually come up, or they might come up a year after I thought they would, but they're just sort of out there. And then you can have other NPCs referencing them, because you know who's who.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that's where you go over to the world builder side there, because I think like if you know key features, key factor, or key factions or key players and stuff like that, what their goals are, what their fears are, that type of stuff. You don't even have to have it all written out. If you just have like a kind of a concept of what their mindset is, it's so much easier to fill in the gaps then, and to bring them in when you need them. Exactly. And like you like if you know the head of a faction and you know how they act and how they would, rule over their underlings or whatnot, well, all of a sudden it's a lot easier to make the underlings, and you can kind of fit things in, and whether they're counterculture to their leader, or whether they're drinking the Kool-Aid, flavor aid, sorry, let's be historically accurate here, and following through on everything. But no, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I think when it comes to planning out a campaign, regardless of your style, I would tell everyone to just pick 10 key NPCs, write them down however you like. I like spreadsheets for that, because then I can start linking places and people together. And just having just a couple like one sentences about their personality, what they do, how they're tied into people, their alignment. And then one thing I did for my last campaign, which I liked a lot, and you guys probably have done this in a different way, but the favor at which the party, or how the NPC views the party. So like, are they in good standing, bad standing, neutral? Like, what's the relationship they have with this NPC? And that's something I just kept updating for fun.
I wish I was organized enough to use the spreadsheet for it. I've tried to do that a little bit, but it always falls behind, and then I spend more time updating the spreadsheet than that. I'm a mind map guy, because I can update the mind map as we're going. Super chaotic, but it kind of has a flow, and then all of a sudden you can kind of see the natural arches that arcing between each other.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that for everyone. If you can be a little more organized, that's awesome. But I know I won't be able to rely on the system because I won't keep it up to date. So I have to
Yeah.
have a little bit more of a free flowing method. Yeah.
Oh, I will
Mind
not claim to
maps
keep
were
mine up to
the
date.
backbone of or sorry, we talked over each other a little bit there, so I'll
Oh
start
yeah,
from the top.
yeah, go ahead.
Wait, what?
Mind maps were the backbone of the planning for that first campaign. And oftentimes, if you're going into like a big new area, like Marienburg, a city in the old world in the Warhammer campaign, it got its own mind map of
Yeah.
Locations and key figures and all the things that were going to be going down in Marienburg that could happen. And some of those things you interacted with, some of those things you found out a little bit about, but you're a little bit on the periphery and just had like a little bit of inkling of why suddenly Marienburg was the apocalypse.
I really like that method too, because then even if your party like ignores everything and goes in their own way, well, at least in my mind, well, everyone else is still doing their thing.
Yeah.
Just because you left the big bad evil guy doesn't mean he's not still doing it. So instead of, I tend to I'll give like 3 phases, very broad strokes to a plan. It could be like one sentence. So if you catch them in this first stage, okay, well, it's a low level encounter thing. You're catching them before things have really escalated. You catch them in the second phase. Well, they're a little more established now. Like the plan's in full swing, but you might still stop them before shit hits the fan. Pardon my parlance there. Pardon my Bretonian. And if you wait until the third stage, they've already enacted their plan. Now you're doing cleanup duty. It's they've summoned the eldritch deity. They've sacrificed the orphans. Whatever it is that's happened, you're now no longer preventing it from happening. You're responding to it. And sometimes that response is, wow, this town's really gone to hell. I think we should probably move on.
Sometimes, yeah.
What is your guys' opinion of nudging the campaign? So not like railroading, but in the guise of there's the big bad guys, they're doing things in the world, and if you interact with them, you do, and you can stop them at various points, like you were saying, Karl. But sometimes the party has severe ADHD and they just go off and start following random quests that they find elsewhere. Would you try and nudge the party to go for the main quest line, or would you just sit there and think, yes, go get distracted, see what happens?
I've gone across the spectrum on that because I've probably ran more campaigns than I can care to remember. And at the point where I'm at now, I tend to like, it's the hero's story or the player's story. I'll go where they want to go there.
Yeah.
I haven't always done that. I've also done ones where like, oh, so you're going east instead of west. Well, guess where the bad guy's headquarters is now. And you can kind of work with that, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a total spectrum on it. I think it depends on the type of campaign you're wanting to run. If you're doing a short, like, hey, you guys, we're going to have about 5, like, I'm in a campaign right now here, and a bunch of my friends are going to be moving across the country in 3 months. So we know we have a limited amount of sessions left. We're doing this story. We're getting to the end of this story. So even if we start getting sidetracked, the DM kind of weaves us back into place. And we appreciate that, because otherwise we're going to run around, be little chaos gremlins for a little while, and then it's just going to have a very unsatisfactory end. So we're hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, going to be able to get to the end of this and find out who the big bad evil guy is and get to have a little bit of closure with our characters. But if you have an ongoing, hey, we don't really have a due date, let's just live in the world type vibe, right? Yeah, sure. I mean, my big bad guy's still doing his thing. But you can go off and do whatever. You can go to a different continent, a different plane of existence. I don't care, because it's about you being able to tell the story of your characters. And if that story doesn't look like what I originally had planned, well, I mean, on one hand, okay, well, maybe I've got really attached to the storyline, but on the other hand, I'm probably going to run another session sometime, so I can use this in a different session, or more likely stays in the vault and I just create something new, and the vault just keeps on getting thicker and thicker and thicker. And and I keep on saying, oh, I'll get back to running that one day.
Well, as long as you have ideas in the bank, then that's great. Same question to you, MacBeth.
It's a tricky one. I agree with everything that's been said. Depends on the vibes.
Yeah.
Do a quick vibe check. Read the room.
Yeah.
I think of it, if I do want to get the party on a certain, or I'm going to rephrase how I started that question. I'm not going to try to get the party on any given track. I am going to remind them that there's consequences for their actions.
Oh no, the consequences of my actions?
That's gold, yeah.
Because what I want to avoid is them being blindsided by something.
Yeah.
So jumping ahead in time to the Westfields campaign, the second big one that I ran that we've talked about a little bit, to set the stage for the listeners. The party knew that on a certain date, the cosmic conditions were going to align. There's going to be the blackening.
Yes.
They didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but they had figured out that something really, really bad was going to happen.
Yeah.
I knew that the worst of it was going to fall on a city called Ulstenburg.
Yep.
The party had no idea where the worst of it was going to fall. They felt more loyal to a different town called Stjálfjord. They spent a week there preparing defenses, getting all set to go. I did not feel inclined to push you or guide you in any given direction because you knew the risks. You had the information you had. If the worst blow fell elsewhere, you weren't going to feel like I screwed you over.
Yeah, it also, just as someone who played in that campaign with multiple characters, I thought that was done very well because there was lots of opportunities we had to figure more information out, and the dice just weren't having it in those key moments. So we were left with these vague inklings of something going to happen, and it was a big debate on what we should do. I remember we were wondering if we should go out and try and find something in the woods. And there was also the discussion of fortifying the town. And I think we ultimately went with fortifying the town. And then it was just like, I remember that session so clearly because we were all waiting. And then we see some vague, like ominous stuff in the distance down south because we're literally on the other side of the island. I don't know what the distance was. I don't know if you had like a distance measure worked out on that map, but it was like, we were at the north part of the island and Ulstenburg was at the south part of the island. We could not be farther away from where we needed to be. Maybe a little bit, but pretty damn far.
Yeah, pretty damn far. And in the context of the campaign, you made a smart decision because the wilderness was a dangerous place. You were usually not the most powerful thing out there.
In the woods, we got messed up so many times. It was the most dangerous part of the campaign was going into the woods.
I like the idea too, because the consequence of choosing the wrong place there is that, oh, well, now you have a heavily fortified location, right? It's not like all that work you did is wasted. It's not like it was the caster using up a bunch of resources to be able to, if I'm at the right spot and I can maybe counter something, oh, but I'm in the wrong spot, and you just burn all those resources. What you did still had an effect on the world, and I wasn't in the campaign, so I don't know, but I'm presuming that if things had gone a certain way, those defenses could still be useful. And I think that's a good way. It would have been such an
epic fight. It would have been so epic.
When you subvert expectations like that, it's a nice way to be like, you get to have the twist, but at the same time, the player doesn't feel cheated that they like, I spent a week and all this iron and like all my characters' downtime and all this stuff. And it's something that just fizzles. Well, no, you did that and you made this a highly defendable spot, and whether or not it becomes super useful or whatnot, that's up to you to be able to try to work with. But it doesn't just fizzle out, so it's not like you're just pulling the rug out from under them. And
it also helped us build
really
rapport with the town too.
Totally.
Like I think after that we were in much better standing with the high nobles of that town. Like what was it, Moose and Sven, I think, were the big NPC. What they were like captain of the guard or something like that, or what was their exact title?
Yeah. I think I forget if I gave them a special title, but yeah.
But like Moose and Sven both came out fighting with us many times after that. I don't know if they came out much before, but I remember afterwards they were always with the party helping us fight. And Sven would offer his words of wisdom and caution of, yeah, splitting the party is bad.
No, that's Moose.
I thought Sven would
no,
say
Sven was a jerk. He didn't like you guys at all.
Oh, Moose was our friend. That's right. Okay.
Moose was your friend, yeah.
I knew one of them was super nice and the other one was a dick, but we liked them both. I would die for Moose.
Moose and Sven evolved based on the way the party interacted with them. So I just they were captains of the guard. The party was working for the town in an earlier session. They both went out to fight with the party, and I just kind of gave them their own personalities and their own voices, and then the party just didn't vibe with Sven the way I had played him, and they really liked Moose. I have a direct quote of like, I like Moose though. Yeah, Moose is pretty chill. I like
Yeah.
Noted. Moose is your friend, Sven is your antagonist.
I like that too, because you get they have a little more autonomy in shaping the world around them too, whether or not they realize it at the time. They're the player decisions actually shaping the world around them, and not just like the physical, like building your defenses, but like how people are acting. What arc that NPC is now going on? Are they going to be this authoritarian douchebag or whatever, or are they going to be like, happy-go-lucky? Let me give you some rules of adventuring advice of not splitting the party.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say about that scenario and around the question of when do you nudge the party in a certain direction, I think if the party has something that they are invested in, that's the thing you can focus on.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the party is just spinning their wheels, being chaos gremlins, you can continue to let them be chaos gremlins. You don't really have a choice in that. But look for something in your players that they're going to care about, or look for something that they put in their characters that the character is going to care about.
Yes.
And drop that in.
100% agree with that. I think when I start a campaign like this last one, I had no idea where the story was going to go. I just threw some cultists in the woods. They were raiding a town. And then after like 12 sessions, the party's getting obsessed with dragons. They're trying to seek out dragons. They're getting more invested with stopping this cult. So I start growing that. And I think a lot of it at the start, at least for me with the world building kind of DM that I end up being, is I'll just throw things at the wall in the beginning, see what sticks, and then try and pull a main plot line out of that. And then once the party, like you're saying, MacBeth, like once they care about something, you can start really driving a narrative and a story around that. But if the party doesn't care, then they're just going to end up dirtling around, being chaos gremlins, doing things on like random side quests. But I think if you can find what the main plot line is, and you don't have to know what it's going to be throughout the entire campaign, like you can add things to it incrementally, but like trying to find what the party cares about, and like you said, things in the character's backstory or just what the players are interested in doing, and just kind of following that, almost like in the improv sense of yes, and let's keep going this way.
So like, not to overly inflate MacBeth's ego here, but I think
let's just pump that completely.
Eddie and I spoke about Karl recently, and yes. I guess for the listeners, probably a little while ago, but
recently
one thing that I commented on in that conversation was the level of detail you took into understanding Karl's motives and fears and interests, and then being able to use that narratively either to reward or to kind of twist the knife a bit on him to make a really compelling story. Is I think especially when you're running someone that could get a little tropey like that, the evil villain, there's always the risk of it becoming two-dimensional. And it doesn't matter, like I can write as much backstory for my character as I want, but if it doesn't have the chance to come out, then did I really write the backstory? Just being able to use in very subtle ways things that would either be like, oh, Karl wasn't even looking for that, but as soon as he notices that like he wouldn't be able to pass up on it. He wouldn't stop looking for that now. Or other things of like, it's one thing when an NPC gets mad at you and starts yelling at you and whatever, but like, congratulations, you're a robot, you're an NPC. But being able to cut to the center of the character's ideology or just priorities, I guess, in a way that the player didn't even expect coming, is just kind of, there was moments in that campaign where I had actual chills because I'm like, oh my gosh, not only did I not see that coming, but that has like, okay, if that happens to a PC, that's a great narrative arc. But that happened to Karl, and that Karl gives a fuck about that. Gosh, my Bretonian, it's coming out here. My dark speech. But just being able to use little tidbits like that in very nonchalant but nuanced ways, and it was It was freaking great. There's a reason I still have this purple file folder here full of all my character notes and the ship and oh yeah, my plan for the people in our party. And
That
it
is
was
so rewarding to hear, because I don't remember the little bits of nuance that would have brought that about, but I absolutely remember dedicating like at least one, maybe two or three little mind maps of how the essentially the party's alignments and the party's motivations and which direction they were likely to break on given issues. So then, especially as we were coming up towards the finale of the campaign, where it was time to start wrapping things up, I went, okay, we gotta retake this castle to reinstate Lady Eilith, because this is reinstating her has been the whole point of this expedition. Now she's a bad person.
Yeah.
She was exiled and imprisoned for a reason. So she has enemies when the enemies come back and surround the castle, and they're going to be looking for ways in. Which party members are going to collaborate and go, yeah, we don't stand with this person, and which party members are going to go, no, we do stand with this person. And this is going to lead us to power, and which ones were in it. Just for Sebastian's character, Bobby Esteban.
Bobby.
Very much just like, I'm in this for myself. And I think he was the PC who actually killed another PC.
Yeah. And then everyone thought Karl did it.
He was so much at this point, like Karl had started off so subtle with like, oh, you don't reveal your hand until you can. Faith and family, those are the two things you can trust. These aren't my family yet, so I have to keep things close to the chest.
Yeah.
But you start building bonds between people, and things start becoming more and more open, and you don't tell all the truth, but you tell most of the truth. And all of a sudden I don't think he ever lied about his self-interest, but he always played it so much closer to the chest that, like, when people start dying, I'm like, look, guys, like, me, I would tell you if I ripped someone apart or threw them off a castle. This wasn't, why would I lie to you about that? But even then, like, I don't know, like, Brandy was one of Karl's closest faith-based companions there. I don't know, acolyte, religious believer, whatever it is. And even I think at a certain point there was moments where Brandy's like, do I really know what's going on here? Like, is Karl messing with me? And I didn't see it coming until we're in the final encounter in that great hall, and there's true darkness in one of you, and he's referring to Esteban, and I'm like, holy cow! And it was just like the veil being lifted off, and it was excellent.
And I mean, I've got to give
that finale
just massive kudos to all of the players for providing such invested characters, and characters with very clear personalities and ideologies. That's what made it possible. Like, all the GM machinations are nothing if you're just rolling dice and adding numbers.
Yeah, it's really nice when you have well thought out characters that you can really interact with, and just like you're saying with Karl, especially push their buttons in a certain way that they weren't expecting, and really makes them think about their actions. And like you're saying, getting the goosebumps because you just didn't see something coming.
I was almost mad. Like, I you get upset when a campaign's ended, but like, I was almost actually mad that you were ending it, because I'm like, but I'm not done. I don't want.
That's the mark of a great ending, right? Like, you think about some of the best
Exactly.
movies and books, they always end in this high crescendo. Obviously, the character is going to keep doing things unless it's a tragedy and they die. But
you end leaving them wanting more. And,
exactly.
And
I think that campaign was perfect.
And I think it ended at the perfect point too, because like everybody was getting a little big in their britches, and I think it would have been, especially in that setting, in that system, really hard to continue playing with them. Mm-hmm. Like, we were. Like, if Esteban's able to shoot someone through the eye slit of a helmet while he's blindfolded, yeah, okay. at a certain point, you can't get to be a better archer.
Well, and
Karl already
Brandy
has
could
his
convince
maxed
the
out
entire
magic stat.
town. Sorry.
Yeah, Brandy's walking into a community and he's like, "Hey, so I know you're all Sigmar fearing folk, but have you heard of Slanesh?" And it's things we were pushing boundaries so much there that and I think part of what made us love it so much there is that it wasn't you don't typically get that power in Warhammer. Like we started off as a scribe and a rat catcher and a cook and an indentured
you worked
servant.
hard for it, worked hard to survive.
And against all odds, and a lot of companions
and
died.
A capsizing boat was one of the things that nearly killed you. Came closer than almost anything.
Too many times.
We were reminiscing about how that was a huge bonding experience for our characters in that campaign.
I remember that too. I love that. Yeah.
Before that, like, okay, we were traveling companions, we were close, we were looking out for each other. But after that, it was like, no, you don't touch Eddie. Like that is my halfling. You don't get to harm him. And I think vice versa. I think like it was at that point there, like Minan tried to consume us in her watery depths. It wasn't about sharks. It wasn't about pirates. It was, holy crap, the cold and uncaring sea is about to consume us.
Yeah.
And we can see land, but we can't, we might not get to it. And it was,
yeah.
I don't know.
The story there for the listeners is that Eddie and Karl were in a rowboat. They were just crossing from the main part of Marienburg to a little island where there is, you're looking for spell books, right?
There
was one of the magical orders was on this island, and it was inner city. It was like Vancouver to Granville Island kind of distance.
Yeah.
And on their way back, a wind came up and waves got a little bigger, and they tipped the boat.
Yeah. And in Warhammer, percentile systems, so like even like Karl was a buff caster. I think at that point he was at like a 35, nearing a 40 strength, which is above average. But if you're not trained in a skill, you roll half skill. So I was trying to get under like a 17 or something like that. And I think Eddie's strength was a 17 to begin with.
It was 16 or 17, something like that. So I had to get an 8 on a D100.
And it's like,
good luck.
And this was like kind of mid-campaign too. So we were kind of hitting our stride. We were, I don't want to say cocky, but feeling confident that we could look after ourselves or at least escape most situations. Like we might not be able to beat things, but we can survive it.
Well, remember the fights leading up to that too, when we were in the heart of the city and we were going through those like 3 different gangster rings or something, and we were interacting with all these people, and there was all these fights going on. We were just breezing through that. Esteban didn't put his teacup down the whole time. I'll never forget that.
Oh god, Esteban was just built different. Like they don't make them like they used to.
No, they don't. Yeah, but swimming in Warhammer is just such a traumatic experience. A player from the last campaign you ran, MacBeth, that's at my current table, I remember when we finally got into water and they fell off the boat, and he looked at me like, "We have to do a swim check." I'm like, "Don't worry, we're playing D&D. You're gonna be fine."
A bit of a tangent there, but I love how who you play with and their prior RPG experiences can shape your play group there.
Yeah.
Because like you're spreading what thalassophobia or whatever, the fear of the ocean. And like again, not because there's a kraken down there, just because you guys don't get it. I've almost drowned so many times. In fact, if I didn't have fate points, I wouldn't be here right now. And now there's a whole nother group
the terror I managed to instill in everyone about water has led me to make that like I would say that is a GM trait of mine.
Yeah,
there's water, swim check. There's a bridge, it collapses.
I remember when because I played in 3. I mean, 2 of them were a lot shorter. Just at least my portion in it with you where you ran Warhammer. We can pretend that was a coherent sentence there.
Yeah,
but you have GM'd 3 times for me for Warhammer now, and in the second or third, I forget which the order there, but Skagnu, the dwarf. And as soon as we started off on the ship, I'm like, I am so glad I'm a strength build, because like I don't know how to swim, but at least I have like a 1 in 4 chance right now. And you know what? It came in useful. Still almost died, but it came in useful.
Well, if we all ever live in the same city again, we should do a 4th edition campaign with Riley as the GM.
Heck yeah.
But well, I don't know what the odds of that happening are.
At least, unless you guys are moving out my way, I won't be moving back that way for another couple years.
Oh, okay. Well, we're
It'll
all
happen
far away.
because we'll make it happen for the purposes of playing in a campaign. I gotta take a quick break. I will BRB.
That's fair.
Right
We'll
up.
just talk crap about you while you're gone.
Yeah. Fuck that MacBeth guy. How can he be so talented and so handsome?
I know, it's not fair. And have you seen that body? Oh my god, the man is an Adonis.
Actually, I'm hoping to run once academics die down a little bit here and I get back into the stride of just normal employed life, an online campaign. So that should be a fun opportunity if we could make it line up. And it'll be drop in, drop out.
Yeah, you're telling me about this.
Central hub, kind of like the ship. So that way, if people can't make it, they're at the hub, and it should be a fun opportunity. We can catch up, do our shtick.
Yeah, we should see if we can get everyone in that old campaign. I don't know. I know Esteban would probably be down. I haven't talked to Brandy in a long time though. Probably last time was his wedding.
If he could fit the time, I'm sure he would. I just saw him over winter break there.
Oh, nice.
And he's pretty busy and all that, but he's got the little ones now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, once you got kids, it's a lot harder to say, "Oh, I'm gonna spend 7 hours playing Warhammer or D&D."
But even if he can just get it now and again, it should be a fun time. But
well, if we wait a few more years, maybe he'll bring his kids in, and then we'll just like play with his children.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be at work and his kids will be playing. And
yeah, exactly. We'll just be playing D&D with his kids.
It's like free daycare.
Yeah, exactly. Free daycare with lots of gory, gruesome descriptions.
Oh, look, like they're going to be traumatized, but I'm a strong believer, and you traumatize people young, so that way they're desensitized to the horrors of the world when they're an adult.
Exactly. And, then these things just like roll off their back when they're older.
Exactly. What possibility of
Karl's childhood?
Oh no, we're talking about Brandy. If he's too busy to play in a campaign with us, we'll get his kids involved.
Yeah.
But like the possibility of World War III, whatever. Come on,
we'll make that happen in game.
Survived.
Oh. All right, Karl, I have a question for you. We've talked about ending a campaign. Now I want to talk a little bit about setting the tone for a campaign. So we did the pre-made mini campaign that 2nd edition Warhammer had.
Yeah.
Went pretty smoothly. I think it was just about getting the mechanics under our belts, nothing crazy going on. I think we had just wrapped that up. We go into the woods and there's like an orc, some goblins. We're like, great, easy peasy. My character, Magdalene, climbs a tree with her bow and arrow. Everyone else goes in for, I think it might have just been Brandy and Reese.
I think so, yeah.
The entertainer and the rat catcher go forward to confront these goblins, and it goes horribly, horribly wrong.
I think it went spectacularly.
Brandy is gutted in seconds. Yeah. Magdalene is shot out of the tree immediately. Arrow through the eye. Right through the eye. Loses the eye. Wears an eye patch for the rest of the campaign and for the rest of the lifespan of that character. That eye is gone.
Yep.
She falls out of the tree, taking more damage on the way down. She's out cold. The rat catcher is the only one standing. We're surrounded. He lights his lantern, starts a forest fire to get away, and just hauls us out of there, and we book it. It wasn't close. It wasn't graceful. And then it made us go, that's the moment that made us go, oh, this is dangerous. A goblin with a bow is a serious threat. Mud, blood, and bone.
Mud, blood, and bone.
Love that. Mud and blood, definitely a big theme in all my Warhammer campaigns.
Yeah.
Was that... to what extent was that moment planned? The oh shit moment?
Yes and no. It was supposed to be an oh shit moment. it escalated so much faster and so much more deadly than I could have anticipated. So I was still, this was the first encounter that I was not running out of the book now. So this was my first homemade encounter, I believe. We might have done some small things here and there, but this was like the first less of encounter, but more scenario fully concocted. And to be perfectly honest, the orcs were supposed to be a lot closer. Those drums that you guys heard in the background eventually, those were supposed to be like 60 feet away in a warren. So I realized that I'd overstepped a little bit. I'm like, look, I'm not getting rid of them. I'd already implied that there's a warband out here. They're going to be out here. The camp is there. They're just not at the camp right now. What I failed to realize is that, 2 or 3 goblins with bows are freaking terrifying. And I think that made me fall in love with the system even more, because they should be. At the same time, though, I think it's leading up to this, I tried to be really clear leading up to the campaign that, like, look, this isn't D&D. Sometimes the right answer is to run away. This is going to be really dangerous. And I'm really glad that I had players that were willing to run and roll with the punches, because that could have gone really poorly. And I think the players would have been well within their right, especially you, because losing an eye had an actual stat debuff. And you were mainly a ranged character, so losing ballistic skill, like, that was harsh. But luckily there's the fate points, which I think gives DMs a little bit of leeway on that type of thing. But the situation that we ran into there was, oh shit, he rolled a critical hit. Okay, well, where on the body? Because they've got a body chart and that system. Oh damn, it's in the head. And I'll admit, like, I think there's like 6 out of the 10 options for the head is pretty much like you don't adventure anymore. And I didn't fudge the roll or anything. You just got one of the ones that is debilitating, but you could still continue on. If it had been something that had, if kind of sussing it, I don't think we ever had a heart-to-heart on it, but if it's trying to suss out and read between the lines, if I thought you were really, really bothered by it, and you weren't such a, you embraced it really damn well. And I think it really shaped a lot of, like, you could see it in some of the later areas where Magdalene approached things, where she wasn't a coward, but she also wasn't a fool to risk. And I think that was really internalized there. But it was, if you had been a lot more upset as a player, not as a character, I think we would have worked out a way to then maybe try to recoup this. It could have been a quest in itself to try to, let's heal your eyes somehow. We'll find a priestess of Shalaya or something like that, right? And instead, I think we just made sure there was opportunities for you to develop your ballistic skill to then overcome this disability, which I think worked out really well. And then in the end, you didn't totally spec into ballistic, you spec'd into all this leadership type stuff too, which became really, really useful. And then I think became the kind of the rest of the arc for the character there. And so, like, yeah, sure, she's a capable swashbuckler in her own right, but that's not all she does. She's more than that, right? But yeah, no, I had intended that to be, there was going to be the goblins, and then the orcs were going to be the second wave. And then I realized we don't need a second wave. This is already too dangerous. And I think that's risk, going back to the plot weaver, the world builder, the crunch. I am a world builder first, a plot weaver second, and the crunch is last. And that is a shortcoming of mine. And I've gotten a lot better, I think, in kind of adapting as I go. But you kind of have to. If you're not going to do the crunch, then you really have to be prepared to, like, say you guys steamroll those goblins. Well, then maybe there would have been more orcs. Because again, as long as it fits the clues that I've left or the narrative that I've been leaving there, so it's not like, oh, hey, there's actually a Gargant in here, and no, you didn't realize that this giant was in there, even though you would have heard him snoring from 5 miles away or whatever. Yeah, no, that would have been stretching it. But if you guys had just been steamrolling that, then yeah, the orcs would have been there. They would have been pissed, and they would have been ready to have their own little mini wog. But on that note, actually, because you guys fled that and left those, a lot of the times when you guys would later see soldiers going east and everything, it started off for orcs and goblins, and then later we tied in some Sylvania stuff, which was always interesting. Yeah, no, it was supposed to be a terrifying moment, because I think everyone appreciated how scary the prefab adventure was there. but not quite to the full extent that I embraced in Warhammer. Like it was okay. Well, that was tough, but we made it through. And you guys, I think we're kind of pretty capable. I'm like, you guys, you maybe bought one upgrade so far. You should still be scared. And
Yeah.
because I thought I was going to be doing this for a bit longer, and I had some ideas of longer term things that I wanted to run into, I didn't want to cheapen how powerful and talented you guys would be to conquer those later things by making the goblin not scary. If the goblin was scary and terrifying later on down when you're clearing out a small war band of night goblins with the three of you, then that's a huge step. You guys are local legends, if not, legends of the empire type thing, right? And then if you run into, say, like some effigy of Tal, some forest beast coming out of the woods or something, then like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's more than a goblin. But I think at that point I was still trying to draw a very clear distinction between D&D, which had been primarily what I really all I'd played up to that point. I think I'd played a little bit of Bessem, but Bessem's its own creature, big eyes, small mouth. It's a fun system, but I was still really dead set on trying to draw the distinction of the mud, blood, and bone. And I think I said that at the end of that session there, just mud, blood, and bone. And again, I think I'm just really grateful that between you and the rest of the players there, like you guys, I think, a lot of players would have been within their right to be a bit upset about that, because that was a harsh encounter. But I don't think I regret it, mainly because I did have such great players on it, and it set a stage for us being scared or properly appreciating the threat and the risk involved in things. And I think where I did that with creatures, I think then you took it the step forward with terrain, the world around us, social encounters, which I don't think I had, within my brief purview there, don't think I had developed up to the same level that you had there. But it was definitely meant to be scary. I thought you guys would be able to deal with those first waves before having to retreat from the orcs, or not running into the combat directly, right? But again, if you haven't had that scary moment yet, why wouldn't you run into it and just try to kill them? And I think actually, to your guys' credit, the two on the ground were hiding in bushes originally. You climbed up there to get advantage. You guys didn't just run in there willy-nilly, right? But I really, the big emphasis I wanted was, it's not like a World of Warcraft situation where everybody in this region is at your level. This isn't like hey, you're in this starter zone, everything here is going to be manageable. No, there's going to be situations down the line where I want you to know without me having to, and I don't think I had even thought of having the redcoats type thing, right? To show how scary, or the developed redcoats, the reinforced redcoats, to show how scary things were. And that might have been a really good idea to kind of demonstrate it. But without thinking of that, the idea was, okay, well, let's show you what in D&D is a very generic, basic creature. Unless you're in one of my campaigns, because I tend to make goblins ridiculously powerful, typically following this instance, actually. My D&D goblins are as scary as Warhammer goblins.
That's terrifying.
Oh, it really is. And I like doing that because, again, if you've been playing D&D for a while and you see a goblin, you kind of have an idea of what their stats are, right? And like, oh, no, you hit it for 10 damage? Okay, yeah, no, it's bloodied now. And it's smiling back, licking the blood off of its hand while it's about to swing back at you. And but yeah, no, it was not supposed to be. I had no idea I was as shocked as you were on. And then the first time we're rolling on the critical table too, I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. It's a critical hit, yada yada. Where does it land on? Oh, the head. Well, that's probably not good. And I start tracing my finger down the chart, 1 to 10. I'm like, oh shit.
I think,
and
I think
I had to make that decision there on whether am I going to fudge it, which I think, no harm, no foul. DMs do that all the time. That's cool and all that. But I think because of fate points, I felt more comfortable not fudging it. And who knows, maybe if it had come up, hey, you're instant dead, maybe I would have fudged it. I don't know. I like to think that I had it in my mind beforehand that I wasn't going to, but that was a decade ago. So who the hell knows?
It's really hard to kill a player, especially in those early moments. It's not something you want
Especially
to
when
do.
you're
It's not something you feel
still
good
learning the
about.
system too,
Yeah.
right? Like if it had been down the line, and the downside then is you're more attached to the character, but it's less of a feel bad because you're comfortable with the system then. And but it worked out, and I think it sent a really good tone on just again, it's the reason I like Warhammer RPG is a lot like I like blackjack. You can do everything right and still lose.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think that's just kind of a glutton for punishment thing, a little bit of masochism, but maybe I am, maybe. But it's I really I think back to that one a lot and how it could have gone so much freaking worse. And now I try to be a little more nuanced in making sure players, if they are like, if you're going to run in headlong and do something cool, you're still going to get punished for it. But I like to be really clear that I'm making sure people have the opportunity to know it beforehand. And that just comes with comfortability with it too. If I had played the system a few times beforehand, then I would have known that, having those goblins, which are almost as powerful as a human, but they have special monster abilities, having them be able to take pot shots runs a pretty high risk. Or, I could have been one of those DMs that says, hey, no, monsters can't critical hit players. But again, that just didn't feel like Warhammer.
That would have totally taken away from the system. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
it was this incredible tonal moment that set the stage for the whole campaign, and this incredible character moment of exactly everything that you said.
I think it I'm glad you enjoyed it there, even though despite it being vicious. I think one thing, I don't know if anyone else recognized it, but later on when you were DMing, Brandy, I think, got shot in the back of the head or something, and it was kind of in my mind almost a mirroring moment. Almost, it was a firearm or someone. I might be forgetting. It might not have been Brandy, but I thought it was him. He didn't get the eyeball one. I think it was a concussion or a cracked skull or whatever the damage was. And for me, having come back in and everything, and then seeing that, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I almost forgot about that. Your head can just burst like a watermelon. Cool. Yeah. And like he made it, and I think we patched him. I think he got like a negative to his toughness or something. I don't remember. But it was it was a pretty intense moment too, and I enjoyed seeing it. I enjoyed it on the player side, but like I say, I'm not always the typical player. When my character dies, yeah, sure, I'm gonna feel bad for him, but that was his story. Not everybody gets to be the holy hero in the end, or the big thing that goes bump in the night. Sometimes, the ballads they don't sing are the ones where, hey, Marcus and his buddies are bleeding out in a ditch somewhere, and 3 weeks from now, maybe a different adventuring band's gonna find them, and they're gonna be able to use their gold and their corpses and their equipment to maybe fund their adventure. And that's the grimdark, baby.
Well, that's the other thing too about Warhammer is the crits are so much more dire than they are in D&D. Like in D&D, you just roll double dice, which is really cool in D&D, but in Warhammer, when you crit, there's a table and things are going to happen. And that's just adds
healing. And healing isn't instantaneous either, right? So like even just your hit points, or whatever they call them in that one, I forget, but your vital, whatever it is. Your wounds, yeah. So those can heal or whatnot, but if you have like an actual injury, like you have to spend downtime now. Like you're not just there's not gonna be someone who just magically heals your bone. And if you do, like they're a very precious resource and very rare in this world. And I like the I like the idea of consequences. I don't know if that's come up enough in this conversation.
What, you consequences?
Yeah, it's almost like there should be consequences for action and inaction, and it's a balancing act, and you have to be able to look at the emotional resilience of your players, because people put a lot of time into their characters, and they bond with them, right? And especially something I don't think I appreciated at that time is a lot of the times a character kind of reflects part of the player that even they don't really like. They kind of know it, but they don't really know it.
Yeah.
Then
unintentional things end up in there.
Exactly. And then so when you do something to a character, it can kind of cut them a little bit too in an indirect way. And I think that's kind of what I don't think I appreciated it when I was DMing it, but then me playing Karl, don't want to imply that I am Karl in any way, shape, or form, but there was some character traits in there that were a little, yeah. Well, that's something for me and my therapist. But certain things that would cut through when an NPC would say something, and I'm like, oh, that's why that hurts. Okay, there we go. Not just character growth, player growth. Like, I don't know. Again, if I'm playing Skyrim or something, and somebody says something mad about my Nord, okay, yeah, cool, whatever, bud. But when somebody says something cutting about my bloodthirsty, chaos wielding barbarian from the north, it hit a little different. And gosh, I freaking loved it.
Well, I mean, that's the mark of a really good character when you do care for them in such a high regarded way, you know? Like I think back to Eddie and I'm still sad at the way he died and not trying to rub too much shade on that MacBeth, but just a little bit.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
That
But
was just him trying to get even because he knew that I cared about Eddie, and after I shot Magdalene in the eye, he was playing the long con. Yeah,
it was truly the long con. Yeah, he's
I'm
just
sorry
waiting for
you
the
paid
one
for my
session
sin.
I wasn't there. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're not there. Text me later. Oh, your character's dead. What?
And Eddie for an eye.
Yeah. It works. It works. No, but he had a good run. It was just the only thing that I was sad about him dying was just at the finale, he would have been so much different than the replacement character. I don't even remember that character's name, but it was my character and Jake that went against the party in that finale.
Yeah.
And then Jake killed himself because he didn't want to die at the hands of these vampires, which left me. Yeah, he didn't want to be turned, which left me to fight the vampires, and then I just got killed by one of them, I think, at the end, because I can't fight like one of these vampires on my own.
Which, actually, credit to Jake there, where like it would have been really easy for the player to just be like, okay, well, my character gives in, it's unsurmountable odds. If the whole party is doing it, why don't I just do it?
Yeah.
He knew his character wouldn't do that, and he stuck to it. And like, okay, he could have fought to the death on it. That's a different decision on it, right? But I think it would have been really easy just to kind of take the knee at that point and join over onto the other side. And I appreciated that he didn't do that.
Yeah, it was nice too, because like my character, I don't remember much about that character at all, but because I think I only played them for a dozen sessions or so. But I remember they were good aligned and they didn't want to side with vampires. Like, no, this is wrong. This is morally evil. And then everyone that I was now associated with is like, no, we're good with this. It's like, what? What? What do you mean?
I like it's like those slow burn. Like if this was a movie, but purely from your second character's perspective, that's one of those slow burns, like The Invitation or Get Out, where it's like something's wrong with this group, but everyone's being really nice. We all have each other's backs. We've saved each other's lives so many times.
Yeah.
How could I think that they're the problem when they saved me from this situation, or they're breaking bread with me and all that? We're singing together. We're caring for each. We're a family.
Yeah.
And then you get to the final encounter, and all of a sudden you realize the reason the hair on the back of your neck is standing up is these people aren't what you thought they were. They're monsters in sheepskin. It's and I think it would be really cool just to kind of see an interpretation of the ending of that campaign, but through your second character's eyes, because there's not all this background where like, okay, everybody knew Brandy was going to be evil because Karl's been working on him since freaking day one, baby. Like, oh, a traumatized knife thrower with fire phobia? Yeah, baby. Have you I've got a community for you. Let's do this. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior? It's awesome. And then there was, middle ground ones where we weren't as sure, or maybe they were as sure, but I was naive and blind to it. And then you've got, the Jakes and your last character there. And I think it would be just, I really like the concept of, well, yeah, the players all know all this backstory and everything, but that character doesn't. And it must have just been such a shock, a rude awakening to be like, I let you stand guard over me. I patched up your wounds yesterday. Like I thought we were good people, and
we all came down here to fight together.
Yes, and we are going to fight together.
that I mean, for me as a player, I kind of knew that was coming, but in the character's eyes, it's such a mind-breaking moment, where you have this bending of reality. Like you said, thought you could trust these people, you thought they were on your side, and then all of a sudden it's you versus the entire room, and the only other guy who was on your side just offed himself.
Yeah, that's a bit of a slap in the face too. You're like, hey, at least the two of us are going to go down together, and Buddy's just.
I can't remember what he said, but it was something like "fuck these people" and then just killed himself.
Yeah, he didn't want to
God.
be a vassal. He didn't want to get drained and be all thrally and.
Somebody else's character who stayed on the. I guess she switched to the evil side as well, but she was on the verge of death, and she was just going through her character sheet and pretty much had healing spells, and so just like, I'm gonna try and heal this guy's mind. Plants her hands on the vampire's head, who's about to rip her apart. Cast the healing spell. He goes, I actually feel a lot better. That'll help me work through some trauma.
Oh gosh, I forgot
if
about
you're
that.
okay being a servant of our thinly veneered empire of evil, you can hang around.
I forgot all about that. That's such a great take too, because it's like he's not like you're not like changing the morals of the person there. You're just like, yeah, no, you know what? I'm at peace with this now. Okay, thank you.
Did me a good turn.
And that's for you as a DM. That's a call there, right? That's like a rule of cool almost,
yes,
where because
totally.
some DMs could interpret that and say, no, healing spells is for physical wounds. This doesn't apply. Too bad, so sad, you die. But to have that interpretation of it, I think just adds so much more to the memories of it and the narrative arc,
Yeah,
and it makes magic evocative, right? There's like, I think, again, not to harp on D&D because I love D&D, but like everybody knows what Charm Person does, what Friends does, what Firebolt does. Like it's very defined. And meanwhile, if you can keep kind of some vagueness into magic, it makes it feel magical instead of just like another tool in the tool belt. And I like the atmosphere that brings out.
100%. And you're right with D&D healing spells. There's not much room for interpretation there. I think if it was D&D and someone tried to pull that, the DM would be a lot more justified in saying, no, it says you roll this much to heal. These are what hit points are. It's all very well defined. Whereas that interpretation of the Warhammer spell is much cooler than what you could do with a D&D spell.
Yeah.
Again, not to harp on D&D.
And you can do it in D&D.
You could.
I agree with what you're saying. Because of the way it's written, it's harder to imagine what it's going to do. I would hope that a character would take a swing like that, and then I would also try to run with it. So an example of that in a D&D campaign I was running was the party fighting, I think, Brass Dragon Wormlings, which have a burrow speed, so they were underground, or maybe might have even been above ground and attacking one of the players who's a spellcaster at like first or second level, very near dead. They're like, so I have this cantrip of shaping water. Can I make a geyser come up and knock the dragon aside? And I think my verdict on that was, it's a cantrip. It's not supposed to be combat useful, but hey, roll me in that 20 and we'll see what we can do. And he gets the nat 20. So like, of course he can create a geyser.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
The weave aligns and the celestial bodies are shining. Whatever magic you're drawing from, just it's aggravated right now, and it kicks ass.
That's a good ruling on a cantrip too, because I always feel the same way when someone tries to push the utility of a cantrip beyond what it's supposed to be. I usually go back to like mending or other ones where it's like shape water, because I think you can make ice, but you can only have a 5-foot cube at a time or something like that. Yeah. But with a geyser that works because you could have just a small geyser that hits the worm. So it's those really pocket creative moments where it's like, I can fit this into here, and then as the DM saying, okay, well, it's probably not going to happen, but let's let the dice decide this one.
Yes.
And from a mechanics standpoint, like MacBeth, you're right. You could do that. You can do that anytime. But that's why I really like systems where, I mean, you can do that in any system. I mean, I really like systems where it's skill based. So your casting isn't just a sure thing. You roll for it.
Yeah.
Because then if you roll really good for it, yeah, your spell could do more, or maybe you can manipulate it in some way so it works differently. If you roll poorly, yeah, sorry, that thing that you always do all the time that always blows up my monsters, well, you can't rely on it this time because it didn't work out. So I really appreciate systems where things aren't just a given, where you and like it has the other side of the risk on it. Like it does suck when, hey, wizard, make a knowledge check to see if you know this thing, and they roll a nat 1 because RNG. Hey, barbarian, do you want to roll? And he rolls a nat 20, and it's like, okay, well that feels a little hokey, right? But it's
Well,
also possible. Like who knows? Like the oral traditions of the barbarians clan may know this or whatever. Like so that's all doable, but it has its errors. But I like bringing skills into combat, not just in casting, in other endeavors as well. Like if you want to do a flourish or something like that, and I think you did that really well with the some. I think they were mostly home rules or whatnot. They might have been in the system or not for Warhammer there, and you made different things that we could do off of skill checks. I think this is when I played the Estalian Duelist.
Ooh, I don't remember if we were playing. We must have been playing second at that point.
Probably then, yeah.
Because
And
fourth edition made it
with Sir Burger or whatnot. And,
yeah. That was a really fun campaign.
It was.
I don't remember it that well, but I remember having a great time.
I remember getting married. That was not in the story arc that I had for my character. But all of a sudden, my like swashbuckling duelist falls in love with this random peasant, and I'm like, wow, okay, I guess we really have to protect these people now because that's my wife.
Wait, which campaign was that?
It was a short little thing for between
over the summer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was. I think it was in between Skagnu and Karl. I think it was a short little one. It wasn't meant to go on too long, I don't think.
Right.
And it was in Bretonia, and I actually brought in like mass combat and stuff, which was kind of cool too. So like
that was fun.
How do you do a total battlefield without it just running into like the lethality of a bar fight? Because yeah, sure, everyone's only throwing punches, but if you have 18 people rolling attacks in Warhammer, someone's gonna kill you. And it was cool to be able to kind of interact that way, where you get the grand scale and it still feels deadly, but it's not an instant kill. It's not an instant arrow to the eye, is all I'm saying.
That is one flaw with RPGs, is if you want to have that big battle combat, it's very difficult to do it in a timely way and in a fair way. So like if you try and have 20 plus NPCs attacking, then you as the DM are taking 20 plus minutes every time their turn comes up, and that's 20 less minutes that anyone else is doing something cool. And then also just the, like you're saying, the lethality of it and the amount of damage being output by the NPCs, you got to scale that in a certain way. And I have to go to the bathroom, but I want to use this as a segue for MacBeth to tell you about exactly how he did that in the last Warhammer campaign, because I thought it was flawless.
Heck
amazing. Yeah. Should I start now?
Yes. I know how you did it, so.
Okay. So I took a system that was meant for mid-sized tabletop combat. So like
a skirmisher war game type thing, or
like a skirmisher war game, yeah. Say like 20 to 100 models on the field.
Oh yeah.
And looked. I may as well tell you the system that I used. I used the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings system.
Yes, we played that a couple times. That's a really cool one.
It's a really cool system and fits really well with a role-playing game, because heroes have so much more potential on the battlefield. You're building the strategy and the game around that hero.
You kind of have it can still be gritty and scary, but the hero has just more capacity than everyone else. So like,
and they influence what's going on the battlefield.
Yeah,
it would be harder to do with D&D, but worked really, really well for Warhammer 4th edition, because you have fate points, resolve points, and fortune points. So you can use all of those to do different things. So I think I just translated fortune points, which in Warhammer RPG are just a point you can burn a given number of times per day to get a reroll. And then in the larger battle system, there's a thing called might points, which you can do to add one to a roll or to rally everyone around you and go forward. And I think I also allowed the leadership skill of Warhammer role-playing to be used in the tabletop version in the same way. So not a guarantee, but if you've dedicated some resources to leadership, you should be able to say, hey, everybody, let's go forward.
I like that, because it would have been really easy to make it either just like a guaranteed thing, in which case that leadership should never be guaranteed, I don't think. But also it could have been really easy to just be like, okay, well, yeah, I know you invested in that, but this is too chaotic and too big, and like, you know, you're not really rallying people. So I like the finding the middle line.
Yeah, and can be within like a certain, it's only within a certain radius. So it is taking into account that the guy 200 meters away in this raging battlefield can't hear you, but the guy 5 meters over and his buddy, they can hear you. They're going to go with you and attack this person.
Well, sounds like they need Voxcasters, not to bring 40K into this or anything, but my Imperial Guardsmen always hear my orders. Now, sometimes they're cowards and they don't charge forward anyways, but they always hear them.
So obviously I missed part of that, but the thing that I really enjoyed about that was the way you worked in us all being champions in the, did you say which system you pulled it from or no?
I did.
Yeah, so from the Lord of the Rings tabletop system, the way you made us all champions and kind of gave us that extra flair, I thought was genius in the way that worked out, because we would not have been able to have that fight and have it be so memorable if you didn't put in that work, because that was what, 6 or 7 sessions I think where we were doing that fight. It was quite.
I don't think it was that many. I think we managed to get through it in 2 or 3. Now we did some really, really long sessions, which was really fun in of itself. I remember going out on the back deck, having everything set up, ordering in some sushi.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
That was great.
It's so rare to get an 8-hour session in nowadays. And,
I know.
And a lot of the players that I play with now are like, so it's been 3 hours. Like, I'm kind of feeling a little worn out. I get it. You know, not everyone's as addicted as I am, but like, give it to me right in this vein. Let's do it.
The shock online, from how I started is just, you know, like, I do 2 3-hour sessions now. My players say the exact thing you just said, like, oh, I'm tired. This is a good spot to stop. And I'm like, thinking back to when we do our standard sessions were 6 hours.
And sometimes we would do longer and then do it back to back, like over a weekend type thing. Yeah. Long weekend, let's do 3 8-hour sessions. Heck
why not?
When are we going to stop? When we've maybe imbibed a little bit too much mead, and we should probably stop rolling the dice and just hang out now.
Yeah,
and, I get
it. Twice a week was so nice. That was amazing. Oh,
I get it. People have lives now. Some of them have little crotch gremlins. Sorry, children. And you know, life choices. Not all of us are as uninhibitedly free, but it's,
so I don't understand people having lives. I think everyone's life that plays D&D should just be D&D. Like, that's how I live my life.
Oh gosh.
I don't know if this is true for you guys, but I imagine it is. When I'm running a campaign, it's usually what I'm passively thinking about is my campaign. I don't know if you guys say the same.
100%. Yeah.
Also, fight choreography is like my default resting state for my brain.
That makes a lot of sense.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, based on all the shields I have that you gave me when you moved away, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's unfortunate those teardrop shaped ones, you can't really use them in a fight, because unless you want the bolt to dig into your arm, just like the way the bolts protrude out, you need like some kind of foam on them on the backside.
Oh, one of them has a canvas padded thing.
Yes, yeah, they have the canvas padding, but the thing is, then there's the bolts around that. So if you start rotating your arm, then the bolts will dig in depending on how the shield is.
Oh,
yeah. Sounds like you just need to get a gambeson.
I just need some gauntlets, really. That's all I need. Some chainmail gauntlets would just do the trick, you know.
Tabletop battles as culmination points for role-playing games. Super fun, because then you get the big scale, and then this is a pro and a con. Yeah. All my strengths are weaknesses, all my weaknesses are strengths. Having played a little bit more of just the tabletop game, and just so much fun when I get to spend the long weekend with you. We just go like 8 hours straight after testing this out.
Do I hate cavalry still? Yes. Will I still fight them? Of course I will.
Yeah. Okay, so side tangent on this. You guys need to come to my house. I know it's going to be hard, but we have all of MacBeth's minis here, and we could literally just do a whole weekend of playing miniatures. And that'll incentivize me to print more things.
I've got my demons right here. They're almost all painted too.
By almost all painted, you mean you have several boxes to go, yes?
No, they're all assembled and they're all on cool magma. Actually, one sec.
Oh, you're gonna flash them? Nice. Oh.
Very
So
nice.
there's not going to be a
colors.
video with this, but it's this bright pink color. And what is that staff he's got? It's got like a rainbow kind of thing going on there.
This is a pink horror of Tzeentch. So they're a lesser demon in the Warhammer world, which means that they could kill all of us in a heartbeat and we would die gibbering and with insanity. I made lava flow bases out of cork and paint. So my whole Chaos army has that. So they're all, the ground rips open below them and the fires try to consume the land. And then I used blue metallics. Oh gosh, my blur background doesn't like this. Blue metallic paint for the metals because it gives a very Tzeentchian feel and it draws out the fire a bit more. But the whole army is being painted in the same scheme, whether it's Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, whatever the lesser ones. It's really Tzeentch.
That metallic
Tzeentch
blue is awesome.
It is very
The problem
nice.
I have is I flew with this paint once. The container's still like 3/4 of the way full, but it's sealed shut, I think, from the pressure of flying. And I've never been able to open it because the plastic is too soft. So when I take a wrench to try to open it, it just crushes the lid.
Heat up a needle and then pierce the plastic.
See, this is why I need more science friends.
Thermodynamics.
But yeah, no, because I would love to keep on using that paint. It's one of my favorite colors, and the metallic comes through so clearly. But yeah, no, I've been, because I don't have many people to play I mean, I guess I could go down to the game store here, but I've gotten really into just painting them all up. So as everyone knows, painted minis fight better.
Yes,
they do.
Of course.
Science.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, that's a statistical fact.
We just had a paint night last night, and I made Doc Hops, my Herringon rogue, who instead of focusing on damage, he's a doctor. So I run around trying to patch people up with non-magic healing. Inspired by the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan with the medics running from corpse to corpse.
Yeah.
He hates the paladin, not because the paladin's a terrible person, but because the paladin has lay on hands, and that's cheating.
Yeah, real healers work for it.
Exactly.
Is it cheating, or is it just using the best tools available in your universe?
I heard the same thing twice. I don't know about you, Karl.
You're right. He is the best tool. A begrudging respect. But I'm not looking forward to the day where I'm passed out and he has to heal me, because this is going to be a little bit of animosity here between my little rabbit doctor and this Goliath. But that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Tabletop battles. The pros.
Tabletop battles. Let's do it.
It's the same. It's a pro and a con. Depending on how the dice lands, and just the whims of fate on any given day, you can have the same lineups, the same battle, and it will veer wildly between one side and the other side, absolutely dominating. Or a good slugfest that's fairly evenly balanced. And then trying to balance it is so difficult, because you follow the guidelines and you think you have something balanced, and then it steamrolls against a certain thing. And so you're trying to have a narrative arc. You're trying to not let your players die immediately. And maybe they do. And maybe they lose that battle really, really terribly. But then the pro of that is you read historical accounts of battles and nobody knew how it was going to go.
Yeah.
You thought it was going to go one way and it totally went the other way.
Even ones where like this is almost a certainty. We've won this like before we've even fought, and then conditions change it.
Yeah, maybe you have 3 times as many soldiers as the other guys, and you lose way more than they do, and that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes they have the better strategy. And also in that particular fight, we were sieging their fort basically, so we were at the disadvantage from the get-go because we didn't know what was on the other side of those walls when we got in.
Yeah. And then the the way I've created that character, who turned out to be the main antagonist for
Oh
the
yeah.
campaign. I think
Yeah.
we talked about this when we did our last podcast,
Yeah.
where he was just a random orc. You guys rolled the crit, cut off his hand. I was like, oh, I have a mini with a hook hand, so he's going to come back.
Yeah.
And then he just keeps coming back and back and back and back. And the way I've created him is he tends to outsmart himself. Probably would have been the better decision for him to just leave all of his forces concentrated. But he was like, no, I'm a clever orc. I'm going to leave some guys in the fort. The people attacking me, who I hate and want to kill and cut off their hands, they're going to attack. They're going to take the fort. And then my second force is going to come and surround the fort and attack. And so that's
Cunning
what
but
happened.
brutal.
Oh, he escaped our grasp no less than 4 times.
I
We tried to kill
remember-
this guy.
I remember being online with MacBeth in between your sessions and just with glee hearing about this orc. Because to the listeners, I not only do I collect demons, but I am an avid greenskin player. Because green is mean and mean is best, and we're gonna do some proper crumping. But just the fact that you got to like I am a sucker for a reoccurring antagonist, but then to bring back one that will like he wants to fight. That's all he like. He more than anything, he doesn't want to win. He wants to fight, and I gosh, I love that.
And all of the times where I think it's only twice that he has escaped. The other times that he's gotten the better of the party, and the party has escaped. But both of the times, including this time in the fort, this amazing bloody fight where he one of the players, Conan, had him backed against the battlements, but he got just enough of a wiggle room to jump over the wall and flee as the battle started to go against him.
The rolls always played so much in his favor. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know you weren't fudging it because you wouldn't do that.
I rolled in front of the board.
Yeah.
For
We
that
saw
one and
everything.
the previous one where he was riding away on a boar, and another one of the players, Gage, had muskets, a handgun.
He had some kind of gun because he's an engineer.
Some kind of gun. Yeah, he had the line of sight. He took the shot. He, I think, put a hole through his chest, but he didn't die.
Oh yes. This
what was the orc's name again?
Ladgrim.
Ladgrim, that was it. Yes.
I love that. I've got a unit that MacBeth you'll probably remember from my orcs from Tabletop, and it was Scab and Du Bois, because I just take bits from other pieces and he's got a sword through his gut, and this one's got a spear through his thigh, and like they look closer to a unit of zombies than they do orcs, and it's just like they're always the unit I throw in first. They always get massacred, but no, none of them actually died. They're actually just picking themselves off the battlefield, and they'll be in the next fight. It'll be great. And this villain just it immediately takes me back to that, and then back to our terrifying cavalry charges of your Bretonian knights. But
love them.
So
gotta have the cavalry charge.
Moving kind of in a similar direction, but away from tabletop, because obviously when it comes to combat in any RPG, there's really 2 main camps that people go with. They go with theater of the mind, or they go with let's map it all out on the table. And I'm just wondering, what are your guys' preferences and opinions on both of those strategies? And would you only use one, or would you dabble in a mix? I don't know.
After you.
I dabble in a mix. And really the deciding factors are how difficult it is to visualize.
Right.
So number of participants, distances, like if it's just straight up, like you guys are in the same room and you're just fighting them, then you don't really need to map it out. If it's something more like you see them 200 meters away, things aren't in range. There's going to be stealth. People need to know what the intervening terrain is. So then I might consider even just sketching it out, if not mapping it out.
That makes a lot of sense.
I agree with all that. I tend to err on the side of sketching or mapping it out, partially just because my play groups typically, like, a lot of the times we have minis. A lot of times I have minis that I want to use, which I'm really excited about. But if it is something really straightforward, and if it's not meant to be, like if it's going to take me longer to map out the encounter than it's supposed to take the encounter to happen, then it's a waste of the player's time at this point then, and I want to keep the narrative flowing, right?
Yeah.
So I do situationally avoid it. And theater of the mind is great and all that. I think at that point you have to be really explicitly clear on if there's things there that are posing a threat to the players, you have to be really clear about it. And then just be open to, I think the benefit to theater of the mind is when they say that they're looking for something, yeah, sure, you may not have included that on the map before, but that's because you didn't consider it. And there's a little bit of an ability to reward the players then with that opportunity. Or maybe you thought the mast was going to be over here, but if there's no reason why the mast isn't over here, then, or where they are in relation to it, sure, we can make that happen, right? But I enjoy maps. I love the minis. It's part of who I am as a gamer. So I tend to err on the side of mapping it out. But I think there's room for all of it, and I'd never say 100% you should always map everything, because I think there's always situations where it either disrupts the flow too much, or the situation could just be better represented. Like underwater, let's say there's no features, you're just in a 3-dimensional space, you can go up, down, left, right, there you are. The party needs to know where they are in relation to each other and the enemies. It's really hard to show that in a map situation. Maybe a sketch would be useful, and there's not really any terrain that they could need to be using to their advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're in like truly in the middle of the water, not on the seabed or anything like that.
Yeah.
So like that one, I think that would be silly for me to try to map it. Now, that being said, if I had a cool mapping program where I could make an underwater one and it would flow smoothly, yeah, I would jump at that in a heartbeat, and that would be freaking great.
That's an interesting example, though, because what I've had in my campaign is I had a lot of party members who chose races that can fly, which perfectly cool with that. And then what'll happen a lot of the time is they're flying in combat. So what I do, because I'm also similar to you, Karl, where I like to err on the side of mapping it out, just because especially in D&D, there's so many things that are related to distance. And I don't want players to feel like I'm gypping them if I say, oh, they're just out of range of your fireball. Oh, they're just out of range of Eldritch Blast. So I'd rather put it on the map and have it all be available for them to see what they can see. But for flying,
I tend to err on the side of it's in range. Like if it was going to be just in or just out, if I'm not mapping it, then I take that as a penalty, or not a penalty, but as a rounding error for the players at that point there.
That's a good ruling.
Clearly outside, I just presume that it's in then.
Yeah.
And even if like, okay, well, in my mind, you were 60 feet out and your spell only has a 45-foot range, but you didn't specifically declare where you were. So maybe in your mind, you were within the 45, right?
Exactly, yeah. Especially when you're doing theater of the mind, the players don't get to place themselves, so you have to keep that all in your head. So that's a great rule for that. What I was gonna say for the flying though is because I print a lot of minis, so I have like calibration cubes. So I'll usually just put the player on a cube to indicate they're up a certain amount of height, and then that does a lot.
Oh, that's a great idea.
We would do the Chessex dice box, the clear one, so you can even fit it over top of another mini. So if somebody's standing below them, you can put it above then. And
those dice boxes are so handy.
They come in clutch.
Yeah. What I did in last session, MacBeth, you'll remember this. There was the wall that one of the players constructed around the prisoner you guys were trying to save, and to represent that, I'm like, how do I represent this wall that's now in like this cylinder of 20 feet high cement wall? How do I represent that? So I go to the kitchen and I grab a glass and I just put it over top. I'm like, there's
Perfect.
the wall.
There's the wall.
Force cage, yeah, no, that's awesome.
But yeah, it's just like working with what you have.
Set pieces are super, super fun.
Oh yeah.
Not gonna fly for most sessions because I don't trust players enough to end up at every single right point along the way. But if the players are really set on dealing with a certain crisis, you have a pretty good idea of where a culmination point is going to be, the little climaxes in the story. So you can sort of pre-build some of those. Not something I got to do in the first campaign with Karl and Eddie, although we did use some great minis for that one.
Yes.
Yeah. In the Westfjords campaign with Gage and Conan and Ladgrim, I remember building a hall and filling it with Lego bits and bobs scattered all over the place, because we use a lot of Lego minis for that campaign, which is so awesome.
That
I
was so much
still
fun.
want to do some more of that, because you can get really great Lego minis that represent things, and then you can really quickly build up like your little walls and bring heights and that kind of thing.
Legos are a great tool for building your map. I really like that, especially because halfway through you did get your minis from back home, and then we still used the Legos because it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
One thing just back on the theater of the mind there is you can also move the narrative along a bit better, because if I map something out and my players see a corridor or a corner or just something that looks out of place to them, and I'm thinking specifically back to the first campaign when we first got back to Lady Islet's castle and we were storming into it and we were seizing it. You like, sure, parts of it were mapped and everything, but also if it had totally been 100% mapped, we would have gotten so sidetracked and derailed going into places that did not matter. We'd be down in the kitchen's quarters looting cupboards. But because you mapped what was important, and then you did theater of the mind for the things that, like, again, important things happened there, but we didn't need to know where everything was. It was this hallway or this stairwell and stuff like that. So we could kind of, it had more of a cinematic action pace to it, instead of where if it had been mapped, we would have been very bound by, well, I can only move this far. And, oh, what's that thing over there? And wait, you have to do a healing check, but now you're way far behind us because we're still running. And you could kind of take a narrative lent to it and to keep everybody flowing along. But
we did a little bit of a mix, right? Like I would map it out when there was enough things. But I remember even like on some, you were fighting your way up a tower.
Yeah.
On some levels, there'd be like few enough guys, we wouldn't map it out.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just like, it goes back to mapping it out would have taken more time than the encounter should have been. Yes. But also it would have distracted us, because we would have been distracted by all these other details that, sure, our characters see, but it's not necessary for what's happening right now. And then what I did like what you're saying, the set pieces, though, my current DM, where I'm playing Dr. Hops there, he's very much a crunch planner. He plans out the CR rating of all these things. He's very like, he's in his think tank. It's what he loves. And his creative side came out is we're in this jungle and all that in his homebrew world. And he made trees out of cardboard, like giant thick trees that are like thicker than my arm type thing, right?
Yeah.
With branches coming out. And it goes up, like if you use the inch squares or whatever, it goes up like 80 feet or something like that, right? And he measured them all out. So if you have a certain climb speed, you should be able to get from branch to branch. But if you don't have a climb speed, then you're going to have to find a way to hold your way in there. And it was freaking amazing. And obviously, like, it took a fair bit of work for him. And, but he enjoyed it was, a labor of love, and he's using his X-Acto knife and tape and gluing it all together. But he got this really great 3-dimensional that we could have theater of the minded it. That would have worked and all that. But we also, like, a lot of our players are brand new and they just got their minis and they really want to show them off, and they're excited, and we just got them painted. Heck yeah. And this gave a cool opportunity for me to be like, oh, well, all the enemies are on that side of the tree. I'm not really a combat guy. I'm going to climb up the other side of the tree. So that way, when one of you idiots gets hit, I can come and try to patch you up by swinging around instead of having to climb all around. Where if it had been theater of the mind, I think if I had said I'm trying to come up the other side, he would have made it a lot more chaotic going around, and maybe, the monsters would have seen me easier and all that.
Yeah.
And plus, just, you get the cool 3-dimension thing too, which was just awesome, and the root systems to hide between and all that. So it was it was a little over the top. You definitely don't do that to what you're saying. The set pieces there, you don't do that for every encounter, but it was because he's such a planning out each step. He knew we were going to get there, and it really paid dividends. It was pretty awesome.
Nice. Another good place for set pieces is recurring locations.
Yeah.
So in the Westfields campaign, there was one spot a little outside of the town where they end up spending a lot of their time. And I didn't plan this, but it just sort of became the best camping spot by far for everyone. So I think the party both defended it and attacked it at various points. And it was just based on the rock pillars in the Isle of Skye.
Isn't that where we put up our home base too? Or is this a different spot?
No, this is a different spot.
Okay. Yeah. Because that was where we rested after we had our encounter with George and the long gun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or it was around that. I remember that spot.
It was around that time. You found that George had been camping there.
That's right.
You had just missed him, and you were like, "That son of a."
Yeah. That was another reoccurring villain that we had. Not as reoccurring, but I think we encountered him 3 times before we ended his adventure.
He's still out there.
What? I thought we got him. Didn't we get
Oh,
him?
he's still out there.
Wasn't there that whole like chase scene with Azaman and like trying to track him down? Or did we
You got
not?
some information because I think you've seen him around town, but you did not get him. You just got an informant and questioned him, I think.
I still want to finish that campaign. I know Marcus died and he was my favorite of all the characters I played. Or no, Guy died. Marcus is still alive, but
right.
I know
Another
Guy's
rat catcher.
gone. Yeah, but hey, a war priest now. Rat catcher to war priest. There we go.
A true rags to riches story.
There's an arc. Yeah.
But oh man, that campaign was also very good. I still like how both the original campaign where Karl and Eddie were in and that campaign ended in a very similar way where there's a vampire. Except we weren't working with the vampire this time. We were trying to steal something from the vampire.
Ships, castles, cavalry, vampires. If you're ever going to play in a Macbeth campaign, have a healthy fear of these 4 things.
Yes.
They may not be the main thing in your story arc, but if it's in the water, there might not be a castle. If it's on the dry land, there might not be a ship. There will be either cavalry or a vampire or both.
I feel like I just got sniped through a window.
No,
we just clocked you really hard.
It never, I should clarify on this, it never feels stale. And it always, half the time, it just comes out of the fucking blue. And I'm like, oh, the clues were all there. And I should have fucking known better because it's there. But I didn't know better. And it's like me with, look, there's going to be something eldritch and like, whether it's demons or some ancient god or something. Yeah, no, like, it's gonna happen. We all have our tropes. Eddie's gonna be bringing in cultists because you've traumatized him, and he needs to go to his therapist.
Yeah, I need to talk about my obsession with cultists. Yeah,
like look, I love the undead, but I'm probably gonna have greenskins and demons in it, and like the undead will be ancillary. Even if it is supposed to be in like Barovia or Sylvania or something.
Jumping from that particular point of the campaign where Guy dies. I really liked Guy. He was one of my favorites of your characters.
So as far as that death, that is my favorite character death in that entire campaign because he died killing the vampire.
Talk to us more about a good character death.
Give me a little background here on who Guy is and his glorious death here because I'm an outsider.
Guy was the last character in the campaign that I played because we had our main characters and then they all got super injured. Like Marcus, my character before that, I think he got his jaw blown off if I remember correctly and had to spend a month recovering. Yeah, critical hits in Warhammer, right? So we go out on this northern expedition because there's this NPC that is very important that we, for the longest time, didn't know was actually fighting with us and had a similar kind of character arc to Ekta, but in a much better way, where she was of a royal family, but wanted to be the fighter. So what she would do is dress up and take on this alternate persona as a male who was allowed to go fighting because of the sexism and all that in Warhammer, which was fun to like play with. In a certain
way. Old world isn't a perfect egalitarian society.
No, I know this might be a shock, but it's wildly viciously classist, sexist, and racist, and there's those tropes that come out in it. So
in the Westfields, I not to toot my own horn too much, but there is more politics along with it because the Westfields are my invention in the old world Warhammer setting, and much more egalitarian than the mainland empire, but the mainland empire is spreading out its influence, and so the Westfields is becoming less equal rather than more. And so Winnica, this NPC
Winnica
that Eddie is talking about, is finding herself caught between that transitionary period.
That's really cool because like you're a lot of the times it's the progressive that's trying to expand rights and everything like that, but in this stance, like you're trying to preserve something here. You're trying to preserve this freedom and liberty, and the more powerful state or whatnot is coming out and starting to infringe on it. That's a really cool dynamic.
So the reason that Winnica slash Wilhelm is so important to this is because for the longest time we didn't know that Winnica was Wilhelm. But when we did find out, what happened was, and I can't remember the exact way it happened, but I think it was at the orc encampment fight. She got poisoned or something severe happened. Macbeth, you might remember the exact detail of this better than I
Yeah,
do.
so one of the main influences behind the big siege attack that we were talking about was you guys thought that Winnica
Wilhelm.
Wilhelm
Yeah.
still thought of her as Wilhelm, although the party knew that Wilhelm was Winnica
But
because
none of the
a
players.
now dead party member had found out.
Yeah.
Ah,
So none of the characters know. They think that he is held prisoner in the orc encampment. He had actually managed to escape capture and got a hold of a cursed sword,
Yes.
uses the curse of the sword to save everybody, and now is slipping into undeath.
And that was also sorry.
oh,
This is such a tangent from Guy's story, but Winnica is pivotal to Guy's story, and I'll get to that in a sec. But it was so cool the way that happened too, because we all knew something was up with Wilhelm, but none of us ever succeeded on the check. And what happened was when we thought that Wilhelm got captured by the orcs was because there was this one crevice that we thought there's no way any man could fit through that crevice, and it turned out well, Wilhelm was no man. So we managed to squeeze through this crevice and escape by the skin of her teeth, but we didn't know that. So then, circling back to Guy comes in after the fight. I think I was still playing Marcus, and I think that's where he got his jaw blown off, if I remember correctly. But I think he was still anyway. So Guy comes in, and Guy is a very regal kind of character. Guardsman, wants to prove his honor and all that sort of stuff, and he takes on in this guard ship in Sealfjord. He takes on the role of being Winnica's personal guard. I think he did some things right and basically got appointed to that position, if I remember correctly.
Moose forgot you were there while he was telling the party some important things, and he was like, "Oh, okay, you work for me now."
Yeah.
look, you're a liability if I let you free. So either I have to kill you or employ you.
Yeah, it was a nice working end. And then I started becoming the personal guard to Winnica. So when all this went down, Guy was of course going to do everything he could to make sure they got the antidote for this cursed item, which is the whole end arc of the campaign. Is that we first went to Alstenburg for some reason that escapes me right now. There was something we had to do in Alstenburg, and I think that's when we found out the blackening happened there. And we were all like,
You already knew that the blackening had mostly happened there because you'd heard from other people. This was the
but
first time of you seeing it. But
yeah,
this is
exactly. I don't think we
where,
knew the scope of the
yeah,
damage done.
carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we eventually go out to this northern part of the north, so more north of the north, and we're into this heavily winter setting, and we spend probably I think it was 2 weeks of in-game time trudging through the snow, and this is where we encountered baby Karl.
Yes, we were talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So we have that,
Heck yeah.
and basically it was a riveting experience when you think back to all we were really doing was exposure checks over and over again. But it was very well done, and again to inflate Macbeth's ego on that, I really like that aspect of it. But eventually, combing over the details of that, we eventually get to this
Baby
keep.
pause because I have a GMing tip for survival campaigns.
Okay.
Give the players decision points along the way. So yes, it was mostly exposure checks, but they were making a lot of decisions about, do we trust this guy, Karl? Do we
Okay.
turn and face this guy who's coming after us, or do we focus on just moving? We think there's worse weather coming in. Do we push through a little further? Do we dig in here? How many supplies do we have? Yada yada.
Because
Do
I
you
think
cross the
Karl,
river? Do you follow it up?
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
there was a lot of decisions on how we were going to get there because we had limited food and limited time because we knew we had to get back to help Winnica, and we weren't certain that we had forever to do this. And then also in the way we were going, there were multiple routes that we had to plan out. To your point, Macbeth, about all the decision making that was done. And then there was this random kid who wanted us to kill this other kid and his dad, and we just thought, do we do this for the guy? And then we did, and then we slept in the house. And Guy had a big problem with that because it was not morally right to do either of those things. But freezing to death was not going to help him reach his goal either. So they slept in the cabin full of blood. But
Ends
then
justify the means, apparently.
we get to this crypt or whatever the place was that the antidote was being stored. We had to get some information about it. It wasn't clear where we were going. We encountered, I think, Karl or a different NPC told us the direction to go. But I remember there was a whole bit where we weren't exactly sure where it was, and we got there, and then we had to figure out where this crypt was that had the antidote. And then by the time we got there, there's this illusory character guarding it. We eventually figure out this is a vampire and start fighting it, and then the fight goes a certain way. It's very dire. I think at this point, none of the party members have many fate points or anything like resilience or these other points they introduced in 4th edition, which kind of diversified how you could use your fate points. And I think Guy used his last fate point to deliver the killing blow instead of saving himself.
Instead of choosing to survive.
Yeah.
That is, I love that so much, because you could have spent it to restore, keep the character going.
Yeah.
But like in the moment, what's he going for? Like self-preservation, or is he going to be the hero?
Well, his whole mindset was he is going to put his life in danger to protect Winnica. That was his duty, and he was someone who was very honor bound and duty bound. So that was the only option for Guy. There wasn't the option of self-preservation, because if he's self-preserved and they didn't get the antidote, he fails, and that's a fate worse than death for him. So he chose death.
This was a victory,
yes.
Which is a really cool way of defining what success. Like going back to like the mindset of the actual character, whether it's ideology or drives or motives, bonds, whatever it is you want to go to, flaws. Mm-hmm. Like a different character in that setting, success would have looked really different.
Exactly.
And that's a great way to go out.
It was, and I think that's where we ended the campaign. I don't think we did the return journey. We weren't gonna hobbit it. I think we just
we did get you back to the boats though,
but it was fast tracked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of where the party felt like they were narratively. Like you've been there is this guy had been chasing you this whole time. You knew you thought you were gonna have to fight him eventually. But after the battle with the vampire, getting the thing you were after, and Guy's death, I could tell that fighting this guy who'd been chasing you just like didn't matter anymore.
Honestly, I forgot about the guy chasing us.
So the way I think we just sort of fast tracked it was with Karl.
Yeah.
And how did this go? I think Karl said, I will ask something of you in 1 year, 3 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just, you were after this magical cauldron, and he was like, you take it, do whatever you need to do with it. I'm gonna come a calling, and I'm gonna get it.
Oh, I love that.
And you guys are like, we don't have other good options, so okay. So Karl calls up a magical mist that lets you guys sneak past and get back to the boat.
Even as a kid, always be networking.
Oh yeah, Karl knew what he was doing. But the funny thing is too, there's a very high probability that all those party members will be dead soon. Because it's Warhammer, just statistically speaking.
It's Warhammer.
Yeah. And they were all not the main. Like, did Gage stay back, right? Because I don't think Gage was on that. He stayed back in Alstenburg with the B team, which I think was everyone's secondary characters at that point. And I think,
people chose different characters for teams. Not sure which one the A team was or the B team was.
I always think the A team is the one that went on the expedition.
Who was the only character to make it from the first session all the way through to where we
like the one shot we did where you and our other friend were part of it. Yeah.
I remember Gage. Yeah. Is it Gage, Skagnew, and
Ekta?
Was Ekta right at the get-go? Yeah.
Yeah. Ekta was starting, but obviously her journey ended short when she decided to attempt the dark fate.
Right. So Gage was not there. Conan definitely was, and I would certainly call him a primary character.
Yeah, Conan, and it was so tragic too. Well, not tragic, but it was very interesting at the beginning. Like the first fight we had, he broke his leg. And then he did the entire rest of that journey with a broken leg on a sleigh that we fashioned at one of the outposts I think we stumbled upon right at the beginning of the journey. And then he had to go on one leg for the entire journey, and that slowed us down, and it made it so much harder. We actually contemplated just leaving him behind for a minute.
And he proposed it. He was like, look, let's go to the top of a hill, put me on the sled, point me at the guys chasing us, and give me a push. And then leave.
No, his character was great because his character was a pit fighter. So his whole thing was like, I was raised in the pits. And he just was very, very fight heavy, which was really fun compared to his last character, which was a lawyer turned duelist.
And then There was another character in there, Njal, I think.
Yeah, that was there was, and then Azaman was the other character that Gage
Yeah.
took over
But
for.
Njal was another very fighty character.
Yes.
He also took a critical hit on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
When the murder fight.
Yeah, I was
where
gonna
you
say, I
guys
think
just
it was,
broke into this hunting cabin.
yes, because he got the
I don't know.
killing, he got that death blow on him, and it was that critical
Yes.
hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as
Just
we
the
killed the
way
guy.
the dice can land in Warhammer.
Yeah.
Gosh.
You can be attacking, and the other person might score a hit against you, and that happened to Njal. And just that little fight where you guys were clearly going to win, had all the advantages. There's just two guys in there, unarmored, and turned into for me one of the most visceral fights of the campaign.
Well, I remember like it was such a well done theater of the mind. Like going back to that conversation, we were in this small room, right? It was like, I think you described it as being basically the size of a dorm room, like a 10 by 10 or 12 by 12, like a little kitchen. There was a wood stove in there.
Yep, just a little
not
hunting
much else.
hut.
Like we were cramped in this space, so everyone was in really close quarters, and
especially after being however long you guys were out just in the north.
Snow. Yeah.
Like the issue before wasn't space, it was getting going, right? And now
exactly.
you're in like a death cage almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gosh.
it was that fight, I remember like the bloody descriptions, and I think about the blood-stained floor and dragging the corpses outside afterwards. Oh my gosh. It was
This is
also remember that
another
Marcus
good
had
moment for Karl to shine
guy.
because of the competition between the Chaos Gods, which the Southern party members didn't really know anything about. Karl was like, no, we are not leaving all this blood. This is to the wrong god.
No, and again, that ties right back in because that was his whole like, look, all the gods deserve respect. He's not mine though. I don't want to fuck with him. All of my antagonists growing up were big corn. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, milk for the corn.
Milk for the cornflakes.
And oh god, yeah, no. Honestly, it's just, I really like the idea of having to decide there of, do we drag the bodies outside? Do we stay in those huts? Is like, you go outside, you're gonna freeze to death. But like the latent psychic energies of the chaos wastes up north, like people were just murdered in this room. I don't know. I don't feel freaking safe in there. Are you kidding me? And even if nothing happens, I just feel like if I had been playing, that would have thrown me through such a loop as a player, if not my character, because your character may not know anything, right? But I'd be sitting there like freaking chewing on my knuckle, trying to decide, guys, we're.
Well, it's funny because all the party members who were not godly people, including Guy, were thinking, oh yeah, we'll just sleep in the cabin. And then Guy's just there with the only sense of moral compass being like, no, this is wrong. We just murdered these people in cold blood for basically no reason. And I think he was persuaded based on the fact that if they slept outside, there was a chance that they could freeze to death. Whereas there was a fireplace in here, so might as well.
Well, like spooning saves lives, you guys. You guys could have just spooned.
I think there was some spooning, if I remember correctly, but there was a lot of snow caves and other sort of shelters built. And there were days where we just didn't go outside because if we did, we would have died from exposure. Which again, to the decision points.
Again, just bringing back in the deft use of the terrain itself being a stress point on it, right? Like it doesn't have to be a social dynamic. It doesn't have to be, a monster or something. This is going back to the ocean trying to swallow Karl and Eddie, right? Like it's just, if you go outside, or you could go out in that snow right now, do you want to risk it? And it's I think that's a really cool way of handling it. And I like your emphasis on decision points there, because otherwise, like, how do you turn long form travel into something that doesn't feel monotonous?
And it was so memorable. Like that it was the last part of the campaign, but it is one of the big parts that I remember for all of our characters. And we were so hooked on that part of the storyline. I think everyone was just like sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for the next thing to happen. And like from all accounts, I'm just talking about trudging through the snow for 2 weeks. It's not like it sounds super exciting and glamorous, but it was so exciting and glamorous.
Every decision can have a really significant impact.
Yeah.
Because of the time crunch, because healing isn't instantaneous, there's consequences to what happens. Conan breaks his leg. Njal has a chest wound.
Yeah.
That he's labored breathing this whole way through. A little GM tip here as well. I try really hard to take myself out of controlling the environment to make it more environmental and make it a real choice, which is something I started doing early in the campaign, early in the Westfjords campaign, because I very clearly remember a moment where the party was trying to decide what to do. Big decision point. They were looking to the locals. They were being really smart. They're like, what's the weather likely to do? Because this is going to have a big impact on our choice. And I hadn't decided what the weather was going to do and kind of had to make a snap decision. And I didn't want to push the party in any given direction because I didn't want them to feel railroaded. I didn't want to make the choice for them. I didn't want to have like capricious weather where I said something that makes them make a certain choice and then I go back on it and they feel screwed over. That's not good either.
Yeah.
So I made based the decision about the weather on my time living in Alert Bay and what the weather there tended to do. And so Moose told you guys what the weather was going to do. And I was like, well, he didn't tell you exactly what. He's like, I don't know. It's probably going to do this because this is how the weather usually goes.
Right.
And I made a note and I was like, the weather in the Westfjords usually does this. And that's something I have to stick to. And then for things like the Northern expedition, I think I did a mix of predetermining what some weather patterns were going to be, like before you guys ever set foot on the land, and also giving myself a table to roll on. So you were going to have periods of decent weather, bad weather, good weather. I don't know if this is exactly what I did, but something like this. And then within those periods, here's my role and exactly what you get on the day.
Right.
Oh, that's cool. I like that because you can kind of set the overarching tone without controlling every detail then, right? That's
yes.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's the constrained randomness of it all.
Yeah. Exactly. Make it, which is quite like real weather patterns in general. We don't know exactly what it's going to do, but we can make pretty good guesses. And then it makes it a real decision for the party.
Mm-hmm.
It's not me deciding, yes, you made the right choice. No, you made the wrong choice because I decided that the weather's terrible when you decided to go.
I'm wondering if you guys would agree or disagree with this point, but I find that Warhammer lends itself a lot more to making those environmental, environmental circumstances more interesting than say in D&D, where I find that if I try and bring those similar elements in, it's often like, oh, they're rolling a save, they're rolling a check, and it's not as consequential. And I don't know if that's maybe me being limited as a DM and not thinking enough outside the box, or if it's or if it's the system itself. And I was wondering what your guys' take on that is.
I've got two comments on that. I think you can make it work in D&D, and I think these guys here into the weird and the wild.
Yeah.
This basically brings the grim dark of Warhammer into D&D, and I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but God, do I want to. And the idea is that you only really restore yourself and can heal and to recoup when you're within the shelter of civilization. And the longer you spend outside of civilization, the weirder and the wilder everything gets. It's really cool, and it's a fun blend of the two. I think D&D, because it's high magic, there's a lot of more ways to get around it. Protection from elements. Here I am. Okay, well, we're fine. Breathe water. So I think it's easier to circumnavigate it. But I think you can find online a lot of, especially YouTube DMs that'll have their own take on survival and stuff like that in D&D. I think it's more natural to fit it into Warhammer, but that's why I was so excited about this book. Is it's they try to streamline it too. Is like, okay, well, instead of making sure that you have water and food and shelter, no, you carry supplies, and you can spend one supply for one person's worth of water, food, or shelter, and you can scrounge for it. So if you have a hunter, they might be able to hunt for food. But then you get to decide each night, well, do I have water, food, and shelter? If I don't have shelter, what's the negative ramifications of that? If I don't drink water tonight, what's the ramifications of that if I don't eat tonight? And so it puts resource management in a way that stops it from being like old school D&D. Well, I have 998 ball bearings and these 2 pounds of caltrops and 2 10-foot poles, but one of them's broken a foot down. So it's actually a 9-foot pole and then a 1-foot shank. And so like, instead of having the hyperfixation on what you have with you, it's a kind of a more abstract of, these are your resources. Spend them wisely. Use your talents to be able to gather things. And I think it comes down to the slogan of this one here is, I probably won't get it with my blur background. The woods do not care for you.
Hey.
That's a great saying. That's a great saying.
It is absolutely wonderful. It's I haven't really got to like I said, I haven't really got to use too much yet, but it's the whole idea of bringing in like sanity and survival into a D&D setting, which typically doesn't accept it quite as much, just because you're typically more powerful, and you're typically having, once you get to like mid-level, mid-range, you have abilities that can just kind of circumnavigate a lot of this. You have good berry. Okay, by eating this 1 berry, I'm full for the day. That's what, a first level spell for a druid?
It is. First level, 10 berries, they last 24 hours.
Exactly. So you don't have to worry about food now, right? So I do like that middle ground there. I wouldn't say that it's impossible to do it in D&D. I know it's something that I've struggled with a little bit, to kind of make it feel nuanced without it just being labor intensive.
And also it kind of goes back to like session 0 too. If you want to have that, you kind of need to set the tone early on, because I found if you try and implement it partway through, players start feeling gypped if there's an encounter in the middle of the night and they miss their long rest and they're like, I didn't get any of my spell slots back. It's like, well, things happen in the night.
Or was I supposed to, how many rations was I supposed to buy at the beginning of this campaign? Like, are survival checks going to be something I'm allowed to make? Or how frequent will that be? I think that comes down to even just like session 0 things like, hey, if I'm a ranger, like, sure, don't tell me what the big bad evil is, but like, am I going to run into skeletons? Is it useless that I'm an undead hunting ranger? Like, is it going to be all living creatures that we run into the whole time?
Exactly.
Making sure that they know to make the decision on certain things, because you don't have to force them to buy things or to contribute resources to it, but you should let them know that it's going to be a decision that's relevant. And I think that comes in a lot with it, whether it's class features or survival checks or any of that type of stuff. But anyway, you got me really excited there, because this is I've had this book for a few months now, and I've just been really busy with classes and work and stuff like that. I've read it through a few times, and I am so excited to terrify some D&D players in the way that only a Warhammer player knows. But they even have like,
so I think the short answer is
stuff like that. Yeah, surviving the night.
Nice.
How to clean a body, what you can harvest from different animals.
That is useful information. Yeah, that is useful information. The amount of times my current party has been like, I want to gut the thing. What do I find? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what the biology of this monster is.
Viscera, fat, and a little bit of fur.
They've encountered poison rats, I think, in like the 3rd session, and I let them take this poison bile duct or something that I made up that the rat had. I'm like, sure, you have this thing. You can use it to synthesize poison with. Have fun.
My Doc Hops there was he's really big. I want to get him into poisons. He doesn't have the poisoner feat yet or anything, but I find this flower. I've got an 8 intelligence. I did not train myself in nature because we have 2 druids, and I wanted to let them be the lead on that, right? So I'm like, hey, I found this flower. We roll on it, and I roll very middling, and the DM is like, so it's either white dragon or white lotus or whatever names he gave it. One of them is a very potent poison. You can't quite recall what it does. And the other one is a very restorative tea. So of course my, doctor being like, well, if it's the poison, I could probably cure it. Don't tell the party members what I'm deliberating on. Hey guys, I found some tea. Here we go. And it worked out. Those of us that drank it, people weren't really trusting Doc Hops at the time. He had made some poor life choices. So those of us that drank it ended up getting some temporary hit points after the long rest, which came in really useful. But I really like being able to use the environment around you in a way that feels unique. And the DM didn't say, hey, you have a bunch of it. He says, you can make some tea tonight. if the whole party wants to drink it, the whole party wants to drink it. If only you're drinking it, only you're drinking it. It's not like he gave me, you have a pound of white lotus leaf or something, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a very a non labor intensive way to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to reward your idea, but I don't want to bind myself this too much so that like 7 sessions from now I'm like, well, actually, I have the white lotus in my bag, and if I use that with this, and
yeah,
so I think there was a very good middle ground there. Yeah.
Once again, coming back around to knowing your players.
Yeah.
Because in my current D&D campaign, I have some very, very type A people who want to know exactly the number of things that they have.
Yeah.
Which is great. I know that about them, and that's what I give them. And likewise with the shifting focus a little bit in the campaign for the Westerier's campaign when you're doing the Arctic expedition, we once again had some very Excel sheet oriented people who were like, let's get exactly our resources down, and we're going to be counting days. And that was cool, which wasn't something we'd been doing for the rest of the campaign, but we had been paying attention to rests and exhaustion and exposure. And so varying party members had picked up things like winter coats, and that you're a dirt poor party at that point. Like, that's a lot of money to fork out, but you did, and
it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those
eventually
saved
get
our
like
lives.
a good 4-season tent. Yeah.
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 I personally really like that. I think that takes me back to like the old 3rd edition, and even I played a couple 2nd edition things where it's like, yeah, no, you do buy all these random supplies. Like, do you have a grappling hook? No. Well, then how are you getting your rope up there for the party to climb up that cliff? Do you have a crowbar? Well, gosh, you better know how to pick locks, because otherwise I don't know how you're getting that open. And I get why a lot of, especially new players, I think, don't like that, and because it can get a little overwhelming. They're still trying to learn rules and their abilities, and then now you have to be like, well, if you look in page whatever of the player's handbook, you can see all these random items that are, some of them very abstractly defined, like, why do I need a timepiece? Why do I need an hourglass? A net, is a net ever going to be useful? The answer is typically no, unless you have a very creative and willing DM. But it's there's part of me that really loves that idea of like, oh yeah, no, okay, so not only do I have 7 days worth of food, but I've got 3 days worth of salt pork and 4 days worth of, stale bread or whatever, because then you can kind of makes you make decisions based off of that. Or what happens if the bread goes bad, but the meat doesn't, or vice versa, right? And but as a DM, I can also see on the flip side of why, God, that's so much work.
Yes. Yeah, you got to measure the work against what you're trying to achieve.
It can be exhausting. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the short answer to the, is good.
Yeah, the short answer to the question is that around core rules, Warhammer definitely lends itself a lot better to the survival side of things. Obviously, with homebrew, you can do whatever you want with D&D.
I feel like with D&D though, and this might just be the players I've interacted with, there's so much material out there, and people have spent a lot of time, especially because it's one of the longest running versions of D&D out there. Like, I think we're coming up to 10 years this year that it's been out, and I don't think 3.5 or 4th lasted nearly that long.
I think if you count 3 and 3.5 together, it was probably about the same. I could be off base there, but
I think
like
3 was surprisingly short. Like 3.5, sorry.
Brandy's parents had like bookshelves upon bookshelves of material, right? But that was also just the type of system that 3 and 3.5 was. It was you have a longsword, okay, that's one build. You have a serrated longsword, that's a separate item. That's not the same item. You have a blunted longsword. You have a training longsword. You have a large size longsword. You have a short size longsword. And then you do that all again for every other piece of equipment and armor, weapon, and which again, the little lizard brain in me, like, I freaking love that. But I can understand why there's the, hey, this is a longsword, reflavor it whatever you want. It's simple, it's straightforward, cool.
Well, that is one of the downfalls of 5th edition, is that the weapon selection is very limited. And I find as a DM, I'm constantly just improvising homebrew weapons based on what is in the PHB, because why not? Like, they leave out so much stuff in what players can get. So I think I had them recently get a large crossbow. It was basically like, I think 8 feet wide and 6 feet deep, and they mounted it onto a ship, and they used it to take down a Kraken. It was pretty cool.
I love it. I like that it gives you all the creativity on that, but I don't know. I started RPGing with the crunch. I like having my toolbox to make whatever it is. And I feel like in a weird way, it allowed you to make weirder and jankier builds instead of just being like, well, I have martial weapon proficiency, so I should probably take one of these two weapons that deals the most damage
Yeah.
because I can reflavor it to be whatever I want it to be anyways.
Yeah.
So why not just take the one that's going to be mechanically superior? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's right or wrong, but I just feel like it's a trap that the system incentivizes you into.
Yeah, no, it kind of
Shields
does
and
give you the
5e
correct build.
really annoy me.
Why shields? Like they just buff your AC by 2.
They do, because I can skin my shield as a buckler, which is slightly bigger than my fist,
Yeah.
or as a tower shield that is slightly taller than me, and I will get the same benefits and same drawbacks.
See, that's
And
where the DM should come in and say, okay, the buckler is +1, the regular size shield is +2, and then the big one that like covers your entire body is +3, but maybe you take a movement penalty or something.
but you have to have a lot of confidence in that to then be willing to homebrew all that, right? Meanwhile, in 3.5 or third edition, or even fourth, I believe, I could be off base on that one, there was a buckler, there was a small shield, there was a large shield. There's difference between wooden shields and metal shields. There is the tower shield, but you can't just take the tower shield if you have heavy armor proficiency. You need to take an exotic armor proficiency or some crap like that for it. Look, my first character build, I wasted my human feet, wasted, quote unquote. I mean, it was narrative. I still talk about them on a spiked chain as my melee weapon. I did a dexterity build with a paladin, and I wasted a feat that I could have used to make my paladin abilities really powerful.
I vaguely remember the spiked chain being very potent in the 3.5 meta.
Oh no, it was a freaking joke. I dealt like maybe if you went into a dual wielding build and then hit twice or something like that. I didn't. I was dealing 1d4 damage with my spiked chain, kind of like a whip, but it didn't have the reach of a whip.
I thought it was meant to trip the enemy. That was its point.
You could do a trip action with it, but it replaced the attack action. You weren't dealing the damage with it, right? And again, that's not why I built it. Again, this was my first character. There's probably there's someone out there screaming, Eddie, Karl, MacBeth, no, it's the most powerful weapon, because of X, Y, and Z.
Oh yeah, there's some jank you can make with it for sure.
But Eddie, to your point there, with what my DM ended up doing was, hey, I want to throw my spiked chain around the room and try to hit spin it around, right? Now I rolled a nat 1 and I hit all my teammates and not the enemy. But it looked really cool throwing a Beyblade of death around the room, right? Because it was light enough. And sure, it's not a throwing weapon. And I proved that pretty damn well. It's not a throwing weapon, but the sorcerer had cast light on it, so we have this spinning chain with spikes spinning around the room, and I had to go and pick it up afterwards because it's not like a boomerang or anything. But but I did that because I saw a unique item, and I'm like, that's so cool. And I took the less, I should have just gone sword and board, and I would have been a great paladin, and maybe my party would have hated me a little less, but they were morally dubious anyways.
But rule of cool, you got to throw a spike chain.
I saw a cool item and I used my character resources to get it, and it was awesome. And meanwhile, I guess you could reskin something in 5th edition to be a spike chain, but you're reskinning something that's already effective. I don't know. I guess in a weird way you can reskin anything to be anything. Awesome, but the choices kind of matter less then. And I specialized into this build that was not optimum, obviously. When in 5th edition, I would have just chosen a weapon and said, hey, DM, I want to deal this much damage with this weapon or whatever, but for flavor, can it be a spiked chain? And it's cool. It gets the rule of cool. It gets, it gives you some artistic liberties. But at the same time, I just feel like every paladin I see uses the same 3 weapons. And you don't get as much random variance, I don't think.
It's probably the big trade-off that you see with 5th and 3.5, right? Because 4th was, I mean, not to crap on anyone who loves 4th, but it was a bombshell, and it was the first D&D system I played, and I remember... Wait, I thought you played 3.5.
4th
I did, for a session or two.
4th was different. I feel like if it hadn't followed 3.5, people would have liked it a lot more. I think also if it had come out with Roll20 and online capability, I think it would have been much better received.
If it was digitized in a way that you could play it online, it would have been
Yeah,
amazing, because that's how it felt when you're playing it, because you had your dailies,
exactly.
your encounters, and your at wills,
It
right?
was an analog video game, and
Yeah.
I think like I'm guilty of it too. I ripped on it so hard even when I was running sessions for it. Um, but like again, things could be fixed and all that. Like the loot system of, hey, you kill this goblin that has a short bow, a leather jerkin, and a short sword, but you have to roll randomly on the loot table because you don't just get equipment in fourth edition, which was dumb. And I don't know a single DM that actually did it that way. But it was like, oh, okay, you get the random loot drop, but what about the weapon they were just using? And it's
Very
it had a lot of issues, but yeah, you're right, it's much more of like a video game. I think if we had Roll20 or something like that, I think it would have performed a lot better. And it just instead it felt like, oh well, I gotta tick that box because I used that now, and I tick that one now, and it just made everything into spell slots essentially.
Yeah, that was what it did. And also with I found the dailies really swayed one way or the other, because there were a lot of dailies that had half effects, but there was also a lot that didn't. So if your daily didn't land, it's like, oh, you rolled a 1. Guess
Yeah,
the thing you can only do once a day didn't happen. Sucks to
big
suck.
whiff.
Yeah.
And when you do put it so that every class is in the same structure, yeah, sure, that makes it a bit easier to learn,
Yeah.
which I guess was the goal of it. And then they found the sweet spot with fifth edition. But
Yeah.
it also just means like, okay, so as a rogue, I cast stab, I cast sly flourish, I cast shoot.
Yeah.
Everybody's just the same at this point. And again, it's just reflavoring. Oh, you have an at will that does 6 damage at this range. I have an at will that does 6 damage at this range. It doesn't really care whether mine's a cool archer ability and yours is a firebolt coming out. It's
Right.
they were mechanically the same, or very similar at least, right? And I don't, maybe at higher levels it was more distinguished. I don't think I ever got a fourth edition character past like level 6 or something.
Yeah, I think I played in a handful that didn't last very long that we were running back in the day, and I ran a campaign I think for like a dozen or so sessions, because I remember you lent me your fourth edition books, and that was my first time actually reading the material, going through all that stuff. And yeah, it was a fun
Amazing
system.
how
Like,
much
it's
you can
still
do
fun.
without actually reading the rules in role
Yeah.
playing games.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I never you I remember when you introduced me to Warhammer, I asked like, "Oh, can I pick up the book so I can read a bit about the rules and figure it out?" And you thought, "Oh no, we'll just explain it to you as you go." And that worked.
That
That's
worked.
honestly how our play group did everything. I mean, I remember that's how I was taught Magic the Gathering. And then years later, one of our friends picked it up and she's like, you know, you're playing it wrong, right? I'm like,
You
what?
thought you could have like
I've,
a max of 10 cards in your hand, even though
like,
you
I've
start
been
with
playing for
7.
like 4 years in our buddy's basement, and this is just what him and his brother taught me. And who was I
Yeah.
to say anything else? But also, like, there was like, okay, you could find a chat room online and maybe somebody will tell you the rules or something like that, right? But it didn't, the decks didn't come with the little print off and all that at the time. And it was
Oh yeah.
much less accessible. So you did just have to trust the alpha nerd in your cohort,
The alpha nerd.
and hope that it worked out. Meanwhile, we can all be Sigma nerds now, and we don't have to rely on the alpha because we all have all the information at our fingertips. And
Yeah.
the actually the rule 32.3 subsection B Roman numeral 3 does say fuck you.
It's right here in the rule book. If you read,
Look,
it's
I don't make the rules. That's what it says.
I met some people when I was in the Magic scene in town here, and they were like judges. I think one of them was, at least, and they played Judge Magic, which was okay. Which was basically them going to see how long until one of them messed up a rule. So they weren't playing to win, they were playing to see who screwed up first. And I remember them telling me about this. They were playing on a ferry, and I think one guy had a turn that was 25 minutes, and he forgot a trigger in his upkeep, and was like, "Oh shoot!" And then he lost the game because he forgot his trigger. But it was like this super. It was this super like combo-y complex. I think they were playing Commander, because everyone I knew always just played Commander. Because once you got to a certain level in Magic, you're just, I'm playing Commander, and everything else is dumb unless it's.
I mean, unless you were playing Modern, and like, who had the money for that?
No, yeah, I'm not made of money.
No,
Unless I was
oh,
a
sorry,
savant at tournaments, then if I was a savant at tournaments, then I'd have infinite cards and never have to worry about buying things.
I have 5 Magic cards that I use as bookmarks because I don't get to play as often as I'd like. Personal Sanctuary, again, pretty basic
Oh yeah.
card.
Yeah.
Battle of Wits at the beginning of your upkeep. If you have 200 or more cards in your library, you win the game. I only play Commander now. I'll never have 200 or more cards in my library.
You never will, nope.
Attenlay Igpay, double speak, and you have to speak in Pig Latin, otherwise you sacrifice it.
Oh, that's
But now,
unglued?
Yep. Now, if you were going to play with those the judges, I've got Rules Lawyer. State-based actions don't apply to you or other permanents you control. And then in brackets, you don't lose the game for having 0 less life or drawing from an empty library. Creatures, yada yada yada. Anyways, it's they start citing specific rule numbers. Oh god.
Oh my god, the text on that card.
Love that one. So in the end of it, for complete rules and regulations, see Rule 704. And then bureaucracy. Pursuant to subsection 3.1 bracket 4 of Richard's Rules of Orders, during the upkeep of each participant in the game of the Magic the Gathering registered trademark game, hereafter known as player, that player performs all actions in the sequence of previously added actions, hereafter known as action queue. In the order of those actions were added, then adds another action to the end of the action queue. Anyways, it goes on. That's about halfway through it. If I was
like a
playing
lawyer's
Judge
wet
Magic,
dream right there. Jesus.
if I was playing Judge Magic, I would try to throw these in decks just so that I'm gonna lose immediately, but hopefully you lose before I do, because these affect all of us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, so those are my bookmarks. Because what about being a rules lawyer in bureaucracy isn't great for in the textbooks.
I should take some of my expensive Magic cards that I don't use anymore and just use them as bookmarks. That'd be funny. Like, yeah, see this card? It's worth $100. It's my bookmark.
It wouldn't be the worst thing you've done with Magic card.
That would be awful.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I haven't sold it. Like, I haven't played in years, but I'm not selling my cards. I don't want to lose money on all this.
Exactly. It's an investment, not just for your future, but your children's future.
Exactly. When Magic eventually stops printing cards and they all go up in value, I'll be holding on to something worth millions.
You know, that
makes sense.
that one bulk uncommon, yeah, no, it'll be the new Black Lotus.
Exactly, yeah, but let's stop talking about Magic.
Right. So anyway, role-playing games.
So role-playing games, yeah.
So role-playing games.
Magic is in role-playing.
I've been thinking of this for a long time, which is simply that Warhammer doesn't have the problem of spells resetting on short and long rests.
And I think that's because you have to roll for it. It's a skill-based system, and I love that because, again, you get past that point of, well, I have to take a long rest now. Instead, you can take a long rest to make sure that you don't go insane or anything like that, right? So there's still reasons to do that, but then also you have the element of failure. And I sound like beating a dead horse here, but I like there to be a chance of failure.
Yeah, I think consequence has been one of the big themes of our chat today.
Well, it kind of speaks to us as players and DMs, is we really grind on the consequences of players' actions. And I think for me, that's what makes a role-playing game much more interesting, because if everything is easy, then nothing's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even in a lot of video games, I mean, barring Elden Ring and stuff like that, you make choices and it's how you approach it in a different way, but do I finish the quest in a stealth manner or by murdering them all? Or it's a social consequence. Does this character like me or does this character like me? Meanwhile, do I choose to stab someone or do I choose to risk casting the more powerful spell? If I go to stab them, they might stab me back and okay, I'll be lower on hit points. If I miscast the spell, something far worse could happen. But if I
might get sucked into hell.
Exactly. But if I cast it appropriately, I'll save the hit points, right? And it adds another level of risk management that I think is really, really interesting.
Well, it is nice too, because you do have the randomness of it, but you can make an educated choice, like you're saying, with the low risk versus the high risk. And then also in Warhammer with your stats, like you're saying, it's very skill based. So you know what you're better at than other things. So if you're much better with your melee weapons than with your casting ability, then you might choose to go the safe route with the melee weapon. But if it's roles reversed, you might feel more comfortable taking that risk of miscasting.
And I'm not as
role-playing systems in general, not just Warhammer, but if your characters are invested and your keeping track of things as a GM, you can get these elements of cascading, interlocking events sort of based on randomness. I think that came up a lot in just a lot of the conversations we've been having of, well, to explain this thing to you, I have to explain all this background.
Yes.
Yeah, which you
well,
don't
like
get.
Going back to Guy's story, right? Like I started that off being like, let me tell you about this NPC.
Yeah. And that was leaving out like a whole bunch of stuff of Guy like stepping into Moose's shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he would have had a great retirement arc if he had lived, but like I said, I was very happy with his ending.
Look, if the wishes were fishes, you'd be eating salmon, but instead you're dead. So maybe you guys
said you're dead.
I'm not sure in fourth edition for Warhammer, but I know in second edition you could choose how many spell dice. Like if you had a magic of 4, you could use up to 4.
Right.
So if you were casting a lower end spell, you didn't have to risk it, which was interesting. And I don't know if you have the choice in the new one there, but I always found that interesting because it kind of makes sense, because the more dice you roll, the higher the risk of a bigger miscast, but also the higher chance of you just passing it. So you kind of have a mini game there of how much risk versus how much reward do you want. Is like, if it is a low end spell, okay, well, do I roll 1 and risk it? Do I roll 2 and I'm probably going to get it, but low consequence? Or do I roll all 4 and I know I'm going to cast it, but there's something's going to go wrong? And it adds more deliberation, and I think you can get away with that because there's less spells available. Meanwhile, in like D&D, you have so many spells. That's where the choices are. You're already spending so much time, and like, it's a trope for a reason. You spend half an hour going around a slow combat with the group, and it's the wizard's turn again, and he's like, 1 sec, guys, I got to check my spell book. I don't know what I'm going to cast. Because situationally, he has so many choices he can make, and the things changed so much before his turn came around. So like, he wants to make the best option. Meanwhile, in Warhammer, if you have 4 spells and your only choice is how much do I risk on which spell, it kind of streamlines it a little bit, and
leads to really interesting casting characters because you cast a lot less. Because there's consequence, because it's going to take in 4th edition, you spend a certain amount of time channeling up for a spell. So you got to spend some, if it's a big powerful spell, you probably have to spend some turns doing nothing, or functionally nothing.
That was a really cool addition to it, because I think in the original you could channel and it would give you a bonus to casting, but it was never necessary. So then to have it as like an actual casting time, almost, I feel like it kind of balances casters a bit too, which is nice.
Karl, it reminds me of every single combat in that original campaign where it came to your turn and the first thing you said is, I'm a channel. Every single time without fail.
Because I'm a channel. And like, look,
Karl also spent a lot of time stabbing people.
It's true, yeah.
He was a really strong guy because he had to be, because he cast some of the time when it was the best option.
But it wasn't even just like, do I not want the risk? It was, I don't want the exposure. Like, there was a lot of times where, like, if I cast a spell, first of all, people are scared crapless of casters. But second of all, anyone who knows anything about magic knows that I don't have the right stuff. I've got my stuff's wrong. So like,
you weren't certified, right? That was the thing.
Well, I was certified, but I also knew uncertified stuff. So I could, if I'm around people who knew better, around, the educated, civilized folk,
not the party members,
I would only cast my good guy spells, my board certified spells. But then if we're out in the wild and a griffin shows up, I'm biting my knuckle open and throwing burning blood at you, because the griffin doesn't know that I'm a chaos sorcerer, and you know what? I don't think he cares anymore. But it was always this little dance, and there'd be moments where, like, I don't know if you remember this, MacBeth, but you'd catch me because, like, we'd be in a situation and I'd cast a spell, and then I wouldn't remember there's an NPC there, and he just saw me do something that maybe he doesn't know magic, but that did not look kosher. Like, there was something funky about that. And it kind of, like, it was always a fun little dance to be like, okay, who's around, who's watching? It's not only the risk to my own self and my teammates, but the risk of, well, do we bring the hammer down on us, right? And it's not just me who's going to get purged at that point. It's going to be anyone who's found collaborating with me, which at the beginning, like Karl's like, okay, well, they're not my family yet. But by the end of it, like, yeah, no, these are the family and faith, baby. This you don't mess with my team.
The little bit of the double-edged sword there is that nobody went with a caster long-term for the second big Warhammer campaign in the Westfields.
No one was a caster at all, I think. I think the closest anyone came was the War Priest, because that was divine magic, and I had a little bit of it, but we didn't ever get far enough with Marcus before he was semi-retired to actually play it out. I think he had like, I can't remember in 4th edition, but there's 2 types that you get for the religious subclasses, and there's like
there's like the lower tier and the upper tier miracles, which are not nearly as like battlefield altering as the arcane magic.
No, it was more support. Subtle. It was very kind of support, and I remember looking at the spells and being super excited about casting them, but I don't think I ever actually got to.
Was this a distinction between people understanding the danger of magic in the setting and the players are like, okay, there are, or was this you bringing some trauma and dumping it on your fellow player characters?
I think it was mostly my fault and Riley's fault that we scared everyone into not being casters, because I had memories from the original campaign of how magic was and how people felt about it, and MacBeth had basically spent a little bit of time, I think, with Gage, just talking about that. I think probably you talked to Gage about that campaign before we played. I don't know what conversations you guys had.
Gage was interested in playing a caster.
I know he had some backup players that were casters, but Gage never died.
Yeah, Gage and Gage's backup character of Asmund were... I mean, Gage was just there from the beginnings. Like, he wasn't going anywhere. And then, this is a great thing about Warhammer. The party needed a scout.
Yeah.
Because you were spending so much time in the wilderness there, and it's not like D&D where there's just the ranger or just the druid that are good at being out in the woods. A whole bunch of different classes can be effective in the woods. Asmund was one of those. He started as an NPC and then got swapped back and forth between a couple characters. No, my mistake. Gage's backup character was not Asmund, it was Círdan.
Oh, right, Círdan.
Who was filled the same role, but for that reason I was just talking about.
Yeah.
That they needed a scout. And so I think that's why Gage went with Círdan, went with a archer and scout build rather than a arcane build. I know the player was at least a little bit interested.
I like that he was still interested in it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the fair warning on it, because I know in some one shots, especially the one where our elf fell out of the the third story of the inn, and like would have died if not for a fate point right out the get-go. I'm like, it wasn't even a bar fight. You just failed your agility check, and the fall damage from 3 stories can be lethal. But we had a character in that one who really wanted to be a caster, and that's real cool. You can be a caster. That's awesome. But didn't appreciate the stigma against casters, and the rightfully so on it. And I think we had been explicitly clear on that beforehand. I'm like, look, you can play whatever you want. People aren't going to necessarily like it in the game. Like, I'm going to try not to do a freaking witch hunt on you or anything like that, right? But like, you're not going to be universally welcomed.
Sorry, just that idea of a witch hunt just gave me a really good idea for a mini or a one shot where everyone's a caster and it starts with them having pissed off an entire town and there's a mob after them. That would be a fun one shot to do in Warhammer.
Oh, the chaos of it, if you can get 8 players and you have them each be a different wind of magic, that would be so much fun.
Were you going to add
I was also thinking of a short arc campaign where it's a party of witch hunters, but secretly only one player is a witch hunter and the rest are hedge wizards.
Oh yes.
That would be fun to do in a way where everyone knows that too, and it's kind of like almost one of those social deception games where everyone draws a character and everyone needs to pretend to be a witch hunter.
Oh, I like that. Everyone draws. Yes.
Yeah, everyone draws.
If you have enough characters too, so you're like, okay, we've got 4 casters and 4 witch hunters in here. There's only 4 players. You all draw randomly. Because then it could be all witch hunters. It could be all witches. You don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be a lot of fun there. Because if you have like one of you's a witch hunter, the rest are witches, the one who's the witch hunter knows. And like even if their character doesn't know, the player knows, right? Which I mean, we trust our players not to metagame, but there's something about it when you actually don't know.
No, I like that randomness better because you're right.
Like
it does remove the certainty of it.
That would be so much fun. Gosh.
All right, we got some campaigns we need to play now.
We do. Let's talk campaign ideas.
Okay, yeah, we're on this track.
Heck yeah.
For I think they would lend themselves to the Warhammer system. One is an island settlement campaign.
Ooh.
Similar to the Vikings finding and also finding out it was also inhabited, but traveling to Greenland and Newfoundland.
Right.
And so have that kind of idea, but that low, like grimdark fantasy. So all of your resources, including the civilized ones, are limited because your town is just like 5 solid buildings that you've built with the other people that you brought.
I like that a lot because then you have like one thing that I think more on the D&D side than the Warhammer side is kind of an error is like, what do you spend all your resources on, right? Like eventually like gold becomes meaningless. Yeah. But if you have a hub, like for us, it was the ship, where anytime that we had sway with someone or an ample resources, it went into the ship. And like our hub got bigger and better. And in the same way, if you're there, you get the cool survival aspect, you get the more like, we're on our own. But also you get the physical representation of, well, yeah, our community gets stronger as we complete these things. Like, oh no, yeah, we do have potable water now. We don't have to boil everything. Or like we have a secure grave for our people now. So like they're not just kind of waking up on the full moon and eating our villagers. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Very similar to what you were just talking about. The other idea that I had was to put the party somehow associated with a group or a knightly order or something that's protecting a castle as it's being built.
Oh.
So your hub is wherever the castle is. And then you have that as your set piece in the campaign as you slowly build up the castle.
That's really cool because then the castle kind of levels up with the players in a sense, right? As it continues to get built, as the characters get better. That's fun.
And anytime you're out like trapezing around being adventurers, you're leaving your castle under construction exposed. So like you have to balance, oh yeah, no, we heard there's this great cool thing that we could really use over there, the thingamajigger. Now do we go and get it? Is it worth it? There's been some, word of beastmen to the south. Do we want to leave ourselves exposed there? And you just whether or not the risk actually takes place, it's just another calculation the players have to decide. Of there's choosing one thing means not choosing the other, and that just it goes back to what you have to choose your regrets. Everybody's gonna always have regrets. I mean, that's part of we live in the past sometimes with our minds, and you may think you made the right decision even with your regret, but by like choosing to go to the gym means you didn't go to the theme park that day. And vice versa. So yeah, sure, I may have had a fun time at the theme park, but I regret that, like, look, I don't have my 6-pack abs, I didn't go to the gym. Or I went to the gym, I look like the swoley Adonis. But like, the theme park would have been a lot of fun. And it goes back to the decision points that made your last campaign so impactful there. I think that would be golden.
Yeah.
This might not be a surprise to either of you. One that I've wanted to do for a very long time is a Norska campaign where you're not like full on raving chaos warriors. You're again kind of like the Vikings vibe type thing. And you have to use, if you overly commit to a singular faction of the four primary deities, there's risks and rewards associated with that. Because the more you get into their sight, the more you get twisted by their sight, right? But then on the other side, you can try to balance the 4 of them and all that. And I would love just to see a either staying in Norska or a voyage north. Hey, your people need this holy, quote unquote, artifact from the Chaos Wastes, And as you go along, maybe you guys are just like, hey, we make sacrifices to the chaos gods to begin with. We do that because that's how you stay safe out here. We don't do that because we revere them. But over time, well, the psychology of being out there, the whispers in the dark, man, that killing blow should have dropped me, but Papa Nurgle's looking out for me, man. I'm feeling so resilient. Or shouldn't have been able to defeat that mana core, but that bloodlust rage that I went into, maybe this corn guy isn't all wrong. And you kind of get to see how the characters develop down these different arcs, or whether they try to use it as a tool instead of reverence. And I would really enjoy
inner
that.
party politics of that.
Oh yeah,
would be so much fun, because it would be, and you avoid partly avoid some of the thorniness of like PvP because it's out in the open.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you have to have a shared goal, right? Like you're from the same clan, you've got the same purpose. So like, you want to be better than your teammates, but you also need them. You're not going to survive out here alone. So I like it kind of goes back to what Eddie and I were talking about in our last conversation, making evil characters and all that is, you can be as evil as you want, but you have to have a bond. You have to have some sort of connection.
I was just thinking about that too.
Otherwise, you just play solitaire, play it alone. Why are these people traveling with you?
I find with evil characters and chaotic characters, either that I play or that I GM for and I'm trying to understand, they don't think they're evil.
No. Not the well-made ones, at least.
That's the best way to do it.
Well, Karl was never evil.
That is...
Karl was a good guy.
Worryingly close to life.
Well, also like from a DM perspective too, you find yourself having to role play a lot of evil characters, and I think the best way to do it is to make them friendly or have them have an interesting personality, because they have their goals, kind of like Karl, which I always use as an emblem whenever I'm thinking, how do I make this evil character genuine? How do I empathize with the evil character? Which is something like, if you watch really well-made superhero movies, like the villain is someone you can empathize with to a degree and understand where they're coming from in their worldview. And if you can understand that, then you'll have a much more interesting and deep character for your players to interact with than if it's just I'm a chaos sorcerer, I'm going to blow the whole world up.
Like I don't want to name drop too many online personalities, but did you guys see that Brendan Lee Mulligan when he plays Asmodeus?
No.
Haven't seen that one.
They're doing this campaign thing. It's supposed to be a dead end, like the world's gonna end or whatever. All the characters know like they don't survive the campaign. It's not about if they die, it's about when they die. I haven't seen it all through. I've seen bits and pieces of it. So again, viewers, sorry if I'm butchering it here. But one of the characters tries to kind of like using the healing scroll on the vampire type thing, right? Tries to heal him, to cure him of his mental illness here, and it doesn't work. And then all of a sudden, oh, actually no, I think I know. You were casting this, right? I think I get why it didn't work. Because to extend a hand to lift someone up, they have to be beneath you, and I am beneath no man. And it just goes into the mindset again of, oh, no, you think I'm sick. I'm more clear than I have ever been. Yeah. And it's no matter what, like everyone's the main character in their own story, even the bad guy. Like, even if you're doing evil things, you believe in your purpose, right? But the fun flip that you can do on it is, well, no, the kingdom's actually better under the evil guy. I mean, he's doing horrific things. He's murdering millions, but the economy is stabilized. People are flourishing. Quality of life is great. We have clean drinking water. The plague isn't sweeping through the peasants' villas anymore.
It's like, sure, my uncle got killed in the town square for saying the wrong thing about the leader, but hey, I can afford rent.
But yeah, gosh, we have homes. We're not camping out in the middle of the freaking woods in winter. The beastmen aren't eating us anymore.
The food is plentiful in town. Like,
the players have to make the decision now of, we know he's an objectively evil person, but if we kill him, everyone suffers.
Yeah.
And it's you get fun dynamics with stuff like that. And coming back to like you were saying, just understand their why. Like what is it that's motivating them? Yeah. And that's whenever I was confused about Karl, it was faith and family. He was doing it because he was indoctrinated into this belief system from growing up. It was the hegemonic belief, and he was told that he had the gift to touch this weave and to touch the winds and do it. Um, and the bonds of his people, because when you grow up in a bitter, desolate wasteland, all you have is the person beside you, and the few people that you can rely on are few and far between. So when you do find them, those are your people. And it made certain decisions really fucking difficult because a lot of times faith and family butted heads. And it was really interesting because at the beginning of the campaign, I don't know if Eddie had crossed Karl at the beginning of the campaign, it would have come to blows. By the end of the campaign, it would have been a real moral conundrum if Eddie had made to the final encounter and walked to the other side. I'm not sure Karl would have stood with the vampire. Now he wouldn't have. He wouldn't
That
have.
would have been interesting.
That gets me in the feels.
He wouldn't have necessarily tried to kill the vampire, but he would have stopped the vampire from killing Eddie, and that would have been an interesting dilemma to have to face there. But in the end, the only people on the other side, well, they weren't family yet. They hadn't bonded in. And
I mean, maybe that's a really good character bit of advice that I'll try to carry forward is Karl did not have one bond. He had two that could be at odds. So you can have conflict within a single character. I like that a lot.
I love to have that connection. And I'm doing that with Doc Hops now too, where he wasn't a formally trained physician. He was a warrior. He was on the front line, and his buddies kept on dying. So now he's got this like PTSD, keep people alive type thing. Look, I didn't read any medical books. I just started sewing parts back together. And now we haven't fought humanoids yet. We've been fighting beasts and stuff like that. But as soon as somebody downs a bandit, he's going to go into instant gear of, oh no, that person's in trouble. I need to patch them up. And I don't think his teammates are going to like that very much. They might hit me. They might hit me to stop me from patching up the bad guy. And it's going to be a really interesting moment there of like, well, yeah, no, I started to heal my people, but also like people shouldn't be butchered. And it's going to be a fun little dichotomy there. But if you can have internal inconsistencies, because like people, we all have those. Nobody's ideology is pure, right? And if it is, that just means they haven't thought of it hard enough.
Well, and like not to bash the majority of people, but I don't think most people are sitting down pondering their philosophical bend and their moral tendencies. Like a lot of people take that for granted. It can be internalized through the way you grew up, or if you had a religious background, like these things can kind of like bring it into you. Society has a big play as well. But I think it's one of the things that new players overlook a lot that I always try and gear to them is, hey, spend a lot of time if we're playing 5th edition thinking about what you want your ideals, bonds, and flaws to be and how that's going to manifest in your character. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that you can always fall back on as a role player and think, how would I interact with this situation? I say, look at your ideals, bonds, and flaws. Like, sure, your personality trait's going to give you some fun quirks, but I think those latter three are really what drive it home. Like you're saying, for Karl, his bond was faith and family. And it's a tragedy that D&D just tells you to pick one bond, because I tell players to pick many bonds.
I take multiple all the time, yeah. And I feel like that's more important than alignment, because alignment's kind of like a litmus test. You can be, okay, generic, but it's like being, what's your zodiac sign?
Yeah, alignment in 5th edition really means basically nothing except for a few spells, and if the DM decides to make it relevant.
But if you have core concepts, and I think that was the greatest thing 5th edition, like there was a lot of good things in 5th edition, but having like the flaws, bonds, ideals, that type of stuff, and not using it as a way to create an alignment, but using it to have a more nuanced take. Another way would be back in 3rd and 3.5, there used to be people that would be like, oh, okay, well, instead of choosing law versus chaos, I've lost track of it there for a moment. Well, in this culture, in this location, it's collectivism versus individualism,
right?
Or it's this versus that. And you find any dichotomy where you can, like the whole Aristotle virtue is the mean between two extremes. And you can find lists of these online. You go onto like, I don't know, Reddit, Google, whatever the hell, DeviantArt will freaking have them. Although look out, you'll run into the furries eventually. But if you I'm sorry to any viewers that are a member of the community. I was not meaning to be disparaging. But my point being is it's because we all have a different interpretation of what good and evil actually is, or what law and order actually is. You can pick it as I'm progressive or traditional. I this or that. Like there's so many dichotomies you can choose, and it gives you such a more nuanced situation. And yeah, I guess at that point, on the individualistic collective, Karl was closer to the individual, but in the family bond, right? Is he doesn't care about the country, he doesn't care about the community, he cares about his circle. Um, but then he was also a greedy, selfish bastard. So you were in his in group, or you weren't. And if you weren't in his in group, you were a resource. You
Yeah.
weren't a person.
Which kind of describes loosely what 5th edition would characterize as neutral evil, right?
Mhm.
Because you're willing to do what it takes no matter what to get what you want, but you do have things that are held sacred to you.
Yeah, neutral evil with a bond of family.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's where our conversation ends. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of the 80 Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a comment on the video. Tell us what your favorite part of the conversation was, or tell us where you disagree with us on something. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. You can also follow the Eddie Proudfoot podcast on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.